Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto uses a katana in RWBY. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by TheAmateurAJ and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, Laying the Foundation. So much was happening yet the clarity of it all felt practically non-existent. Noises were muffled, vision was incredibly obscured, touch barely breached numbness, and the barest hint of aromas and tastes reached the tongue and nostrils. No sense was spared but nothing was fully registered, not even the passing of time. Such was the state of any mind under enough, or even too little, stress. This could happen for various reasons and perhaps a specific one could be determined at a later time, but for the recipient of these sensations that scenario was put on the furthest back burner possible. While his young mind couldn't properly comprehend a majority of what it took in, he was still able to pick out little bits and pieces, though it didn't help that whatever he managed to pick up kept changing, for better or worse. Blades of grass tickled his feet in one instance, only to be replaced by tough gravel in another. Distant laughter was heard followed by echoed yells of various emotions. Warmth from what he guessed was a blanket covered him before changing to the warmth of fire, maybe? A strong smell of fresh bread wafted in the air until it switched to iron? It was all confusing, but nothing was questioned in his mental state. It was all simply there, and then it wasn't. That is, until something decided to stay. A pair of red eyes. They just stared and didn't convey anything. The sight was somehow simultaneously calm and intimidating while the mystery behind them only enhanced the sensation. Yet he only stared back, not feeling much of anything but idle curiosity. Then they suddenly disappeared and he felt a pair of arms wrap around him. You have so much ahead of you, Naruto. Come on, Naruto. You need to wake up, a woman's voice spoke. HM? He groaned out unintelligibly. She sighed before she shook his shoulder a little more. We can't wait on you forever. Get your lazy butt up or I'm not making you any breakfast. The groggy male let a yawn escape him as he stretched as best he could while his eyelids cracked open. But I can't see anything, he muttered offhandedly. The female rolled her eyes and reached forward to pull the object on his face down to his neck to join his other accessory, revealing half-lidded azure eyes drowsily looking at the ceiling. There, I've granted you sight once again. Use my esteemed gift with the godly inventions known as arms and legs to lift thee from thy couch. She replied in her best snobbish voice. A smile formed on his tired face as he adjusted the cloth to comfortably wrap around his throat. It disappeared though, as he glanced at the clock hanging on the wall. Really, 5 a.m? I thought you loved me, I am. Why would do this to me? He muttered in monotonous despair, accented by another powerful yawn. He turned his gaze to said girl, rolling her brown eyes at him again as she continued brushing her hair while decked out in most of her white uniform. With her long brown locks still holding moisture, he guessed she had just gotten out of the shower. It's because I love you that I don't want you suddenly going back on your word. You don't want this to be the first promise you've ever broken, do you? And remind me again what that promise was, please. I stopped brushing momentarily, and gave him a faux glare with crossed arms. You said you were going to help me buy more ingredients while Dad gets the kitchen ready. Did you really forget? Naruto rubbed some of the crust from his eyes while sitting up, making the small blanket covering him fall from his torso. Sorry, I was busy last night, and I guess it might have slipped my mind. With the blanket no longer covering his chest, she glanced at his tattered black shirt, and narrowed her eyes at him. You went on another one of your outings, didn't you? Naruto looked down and saw a few small rips and tears in his clothing along with some dried blood spots in the fabric, and on his arms. Look, I know, Naruto, I know, she interrupted as her face softened. It's just that knowing you're doing this without anyone watching your back makes me worried. You never know what can happen and I don't want you just up and disappearing one day. With a sigh the male briefly ran a hand through his spiky blonde hair before looking back at her with an understanding smile. I'm sorry if it stresses you out, but doing this has helped me a lot in my training. I uncrossed her arms and plopped next to the blonde on the couch after he moved out of the way, showing his pants weren't much better off than his shirt. She leaned her head and back against the cushion and lazily glanced at him. So which was it this time? Forever Fall or Emerald? Or did you decide to just tick off a bunch of criminals? He matched her position and waved her off. I don't think messing with people in the city is exactly a good idea. I don't want to end up getting a criminal record if things go south and I screw everything up. The brunette scoffed. And sneaking by the police and huntsmen into grim-infested areas is perfectly reasonable? Yep. At Iam's blank and pointed look he said, alright, it isn't exactly the best thing a law-abiding citizen would do, but you know I can be real sneaky when I need to be and the forestry provides plenty of cover. Still think it's a really stupid thing to do considering what's in there. I don't know what you're worried about. It's not like I'm allergic to the red sap in Forever Fall, he replied indifferently. She smacked his shoulder. You know what I mean, you idiot. What if you ran into an entire pack of Beowulfs and they ganged up on you? What about the same but with Ursai? Naruto placed a calming hand on her shoulder. Hey, take it easy. I stay as safe as I can. His words didn't exactly help but she calmed down a little until he easily said, besides, last night was the 3rd Beowulf pack I've run into. What? What's gotten you two so excited? An older male voice asked. Naruto and I turned to see Ichiraku emerge from the hallway in his full uniform and prepared for the day ahead. Nothing big, old man, Naruto replied with a greeting wave and squinted eyes to match the man's own. Yes, something big, exclaimed. He went to get himself attacked again yesterday, and apparently his little trips have been more dangerous than we've thought. Obviously you haven't seen me fight. That's not the point. Looked off to the side and muttered, we should have found some way to get you into a combat school, I swear. You know perfectly well I couldn't afford it or get any of those fancy scholarships that I'm sure go to people with connections to actual huntsmen. I had to spend what I had on my base weapon anyway, and it was less than the personal forging costs over at Signal. The blonde took a moment to glance at the rusted scabbard on the coffee table in front of him. Teuchi sighed. Naruto, you know that we were perfectly fine with paying for it, and you know that I couldn't let you do that. You've been saving that money for years to improve the restaurant and expand, and I'm not gonna be the reason for you to wait longer, Naruto sternly retorted. He honestly didn't think he could sleep at night knowing he delayed their dream. They haven't exactly been a failing business over the past decade, but the positive incline in sales in their modest restaurant had been very slow enough to save very little at a time while spending on the necessities and living comfortably. You just had to be the stubborn type, whispered offhandedly. Damn straight, Databeo. Ignoring the familiar verbal tick, the father continued the topic when he first walked in. How bad was it this time, Naruto? I may or may not have had a tree fall on me more than once and a dismembered claw possibly found a temporary home in my thigh, he admitted sheepishly. Gaped at him. You were out there for so long that your aura actually went down that much? You never run out, the blonde shrugged. I was working on something special and it sorta drained me faster since I used it so much. Maybe you should tone down the training. You usually only have torn clothes, but if you can't be safe enough to stay away from physical injuries without proper control of whatever you're working on, then you need to reconsider your options. We don't need a repeat of the first time you sneaked out on your own a few years ago, Teuchi ended grimly. Naruto and flinched a tad thinking back to that memory, the former out of embarrassment, and the latter just from the sight of the blonde when he got back after the long trek. Once Naruto was finally able to afford a quality weapon by working with the Ikarakus and doing odd jobs around Vale, he got the smart idea to make his first excursion to the borders of Forever Fall. Long story short, Naruto got his ass handed to him since management of his aura was still rough and he had practically no fighting experience. He escaped with his life and his injuries weren't overly threatening due to his freakishly large aura healing him right away after the fight, but when it lowered enough he took some nasty shots. He didn't know how he managed to travel so far back without grabbing too much attention, but he sure as hell got an earful when he got caught going to his room with large portions of his shirt and pants hanging by mere threads with bloody stains. He wasn't the brightest 13-year-old at the time, probably not even the brightest 17-year-old presently depending on who was asked, and that was only with 2 Beowulfs. He'd be prouder of his progress since then if he didn't have such a rocky start, but he wasn't half bad without formal training in his humble opinion. He could have gotten an easier ride to combat schools by committing to the police or basic military service in places like Atlas, sure, but that wasn't what he wanted nor where he desired to travel at the moment. No, he wanted to stay in Vale and be among the best of the best in the world, perhaps the best if he had his way. And to be the best he had to be a huntsman, something that made overly anxious ever since the day he told her. Teuchi was more accepting, but he always figured it to be a possibility ever since the blonde was younger. When asked by the female brunette as to why he chose the dangerous profession when he was 12, he gave a short and sweet answer: to protect, and to make them proud. So without having a completely beneficial way into Signal, without making the Ichiraku family pay for it, he just had to prepare himself for the combat tests anyone could take. For that to work he needed to be able to at least fight a simple damn Beowulf without joining the great ramen goddess in the sky. And what better way to prepare than to force himself into first-hand experience? It was 10 times better than hitting a dummy or something, even if the general populace would agree he was as many times as stupid for doing so. Maybe he should have worked more to get a tutor? Oh well, too late now. He already had to worry about paying rent and saving up for upgrades anyway. Naruto shook his thoughts and gave the elder male a cheesy thumbs up. I'm fine, old man. I'm not dying anytime soon. He paused to scrunch his face in thought. At least not until I actually become a huntsman. Groaned and held her face in her hands. You're going to give me gray hair soon, I just know it. Ignoring her, Naruto shot up from his seat to his 6-foot height and started making his way towards the room he rented in the little family home. He could have stayed for free but insisted that he would at least work for it and earn some extra money on the side along with whatever jobs he could do when he wasn't training. And take a shower. I'm not walking with you smelling like the rear end of a Borbutusk. Shouted behind him. Yeah. Cracking a smile, stood up and made her way to finish getting ready herself. Teuchi remained where he was, an amused smirk stressing tan wrinkles while adjusting his signature hat. It was little moments like this that made him think of how less bright his and his daughter's lives would have been without the blonde around. He figured it was good for the young man as well. After all, he couldn't imagine what would have happened had he not found him on that day. Is strawberry shampoo seriously all that's left? You used the rest of mine, didn't you old fart? Ha! Teuchi chuckled while walking downstairs to the kitchen. Oh yes, couldn't imagine a life without him. The pair briskly walked along the sidewalk, both sharing idle conversation, while their hair smelled gloriously of strawberries. Ayame had her arms locked behind her back only to be broken from waving to the occasional early bird that greeted them. Naruto joined in the greetings as well, but he was more cheerful about it with his bright smile and hands behind his head carelessly. So, is going to the market all we're doing? Naruto asked with a single brow raised. Nope. Since you gave me extra sewing work for later along with the fact you happened to forget helping me today, I suddenly had the impulse to make more stops along the way and back. Doesn't that sound fun? She asked while giving him an all-too-sweet smile. Oh, he definitely knew that expression. It was used whenever she was giving him some sort of punishment, and it looked like this time it was as a human packed meal. He just prayed he wasn't going to be convinced to cough up some lean of his own for her devices. The last time she did after he made her mad, his poor little Gamma went from her fat and happy self to a shriveled green husk. He swears to this day that the little toad wallet's eyes have never looked the same. Yeah, total yippee and wahoo kind of fun, he replied with his best fake smile. He knew she saw right through him, yet she didn't change her chipper mood. Well, I'm glad you think so, since I've had my eyes on some stuff for a while and have even saved up a good amount of spending money. I think some of it's on sale too. Yay. And on they went, taking the better part of 3 hours walking around, browsing and purchasing whatever caught the brunette's eyes, with Naruto carrying it all. They both knew they had to be back by 10, but Ayame was making the most of whatever shops were available. It was when the blonde could barely see over the pile of goods wrapped in his arms that he was led into their apparent last stop. Welcome to Tuxin's Book Trade, home to every book under the sun. How can I? Oh, good morning, Ayame, a slightly rough male voice greeted. Morning, Tuxin. Rearranging things again? Ayame responded with a polite smile. The muscular man set down a large stack of books he was carrying from the back and gave the young woman a slightly abashed grin. Hopefully for the last time, yes. Unfortunately, having so much product come in makes organizing everything a little annoying. Is that why you said that line or whatever that was? To show you have everything? The other male questioned. The shop owner curiously looked behind Ayame only to see the legs and arms of someone carrying a hefty load even bigger than the one he just let down. Thankfully, the spiky yellow hair peeking over the top tipped off the mysterious guest instantly. Do something stupid again, Naruto? The black-haired male asked with some amusement. You can't prove anything, Databeo. He would probably be more embarrassed if he actually cared that much of making an image. Sure, he was eccentric and had his moments, but he doubted the older man would ever treat him differently regardless. He could honestly say that Tuxin was a cool guy after he did some small jobs for the shop when he first got settled into the city a little over a year ago. Plus, it helped that the man had awesome sideburns. Tuxin chuckled lightly. And yes, I'm trying out a catchphrase. Have to make the business more legit somehow, right? Already going through some of the new selection of books, Ayame said. I'm sure you'll be fine without it, but I guess a little flair never hurts. That's what I'm going for. Anyway, what can I do for you both? The brunette audibly snapped a book shut and quickly replaced it with another. Just looking, and giving Naruto some strength training on the side, she said cheekily. You say that as if this is heavy for me. The blonde retorted smugly before continuing curiously. But since we're here, are the new comics in? Already piled up on the counter for ya. Tuxin replied with a head gesture behind him, not that the blonde saw the action. Thanks. He would have gone to grab them if not for his current predicament, something he realized quickly. Ayame, HM, can you please get them for me? She took a moment to maybe find a way to mess with him further, but figured he'd been good enough so far and decided against it. Sure, she went and grabbed the colorful pile of pictured fantasy and action before speaking to Tuxin again. So, has the third crusade come in yet? It feels like it's been forever since I requested it. Tuxin frowned ever so slightly. Sorry, not yet. There was a mishap with the ordering, so it's gonna take a while longer, especially with the delivery route being as long and risky as it is. Ayame let out a minor sigh. Oh well, I have some others to finish anyway. You'll be fine being a little more patient. It's not like being without it for now is the end of the world, the man replied. Ayame walked over and placed the comics on top of everything else Naruto was carrying. I guess so, but you might want to rethink that slogan then, she said jokingly. Nah, that took too long to figure out the first time. It'll work itself out. Hopefully it does. Well, we probably wasted enough of the morning. Naruto and I should get back before the stand opens. Hope you have a good day, Tuxin. Ayame waved as she made her way to the front door. Later, sideburns. Naruto added while following the female's lead. Have a good one, Tuxin replied. As he watched them leave, he took a moment to think to himself. Naruto and Ayame were two of the many local people that brought joy to his everyday life ever since he moved to the city. Surrounded by all kinds of literature, and sharing it with others that enjoyed it was certainly a living he could see himself carrying on as long as he could. It was definitely better than what he was doing before, which reminded him, he needed to check with his friend about any word of his presence attracting any attention. If all was well, then he didn't have to worry about using his backup plan and running to Vacuo. We're back! Naruto shouted while aggressively passing through the hang flaps at the front of the ramen stand, recently bought goods still held firmly in his arms. Good, I was beginning to think you two somehow got lost. Tochi exclaimed from the kitchen, visibly chopping up some vegetables. Well, we're not, and we got everything. I grabbed the 3 large paper bags of produce, spices and meat from Naruto. Take the rest to my room, if you'd be so kind, she told the blonde pleasantly. Naruto rolled his eyes and mock bowed. Of course, my queen. As a slave it's my bestowed duty, after all. He started making his way to a doorway at the back of the kitchen that opened up to stairs. And maybe after that I could clean the lady's personal quarters if she'd give me the honor? He echoed haughtily midway to the 2nd floor. Sure, why else would we keep you around? I exclaimed teasingly back while washing her hands. A smile formed on her face when she barely heard him grumble to himself before saying, and since when do you use words like bestowed? Did you see it in a comic and look it up? Maybe. He called back. Giggled to herself and stepped right into her duties alongside her father. As usual, the workday went by smoothly with Naruto helping in any way he could, like cleaning the dining area and organizing whatever stock wasn't being used. He even made a few deliveries for some regulars that couldn't be bothered to face the lunch rush. They didn't necessarily have a delivery service for their business, but the people they did it for knew them pretty well and always gave a nice tip. While all went by normally for everyone, Naruto was mentally planning out his own personal business for when he was no longer needed in the stand. Alright, everything seems ready, Naruto muttered to himself while checking his supplies. Fingerless black gloves fit well, the metal guards sewn over his knuckles and plates on the backs of his hands shiny to his liking. His unzipped and burned orange hoodie hugged him snugly, and went well with his black shirt, and its lone orange swirl in the middle of his chest. Black pants covered his legs and fit loosely over the black boots on his feet. He turned to the mirror in his room to take this all in. His gaze momentarily lingered on the unique 3 facial marks on each cheek he'd had as far as he could remember, and gingerly traced one with a finger. If only he had a lean for every time he was confused for a faunus. However, his eyes stared at something else longer, that being the pair of his most prized possessions securely wrapped around his neck. A dark blue cloth with a metallic plate sewn in the middle was easier to spot, as was the symbol of a swirl with a triangular tail of sorts hanging off of it engraved into the metal. Hidden underneath the sturdy cloth was most of a silver necklace chain that held its ornament just below the larger square piece of metal. The ornament itself was of round silver to match the chain, but proudly displayed an orange swirl not unlike the one on his shirt, along with an outer ring surrounding it of sky blue fading into black. The headband and locket were the last remnants of his parents that he had, besides what memories he could conjure up. He wore them everywhere he went and served as constant reminders of his goals and efforts. Both the symbol on the headband and swirl in the silver were even etched onto the metal plates on his gloves, swirl on the right and the other on the left. The blonde stared into his own eyes one last time before whispering, "Make em proud." Walking by to quickly grab his blade resting on his dresser, he started to walk out of the home and downstairs through the conjoined ramen stand. He tried to look as uninteresting as possible, but he just had to love orange too much. "And where are you going?" asked sternly behind him right as he was about to reach the exit. Naruto froze in his tracks and slowly turned around to meet the brunette's suspicious eyes with her hands firmly on her hips. It didn't help that she had a big ladle at the ready. They stared at each other in silence, one more anxious than the other. "I'm out?" Naruto responded. So what requires you to take your weapon along?" she asked, pointing to the hilt peeking over his shoulder. "You know, stuff totally safe and family-friendly stuff. Besides, it's a habit for any huntsman to take his weapon everywhere, right?" Marched right to him and poked him in the chest with conviction. As she looked up to his taller frame, she said, "You are not seriously taking off again when you were out just last night, are you?" The blonde repressed a shiver. "Oh, sweet, lovable, beautiful Don't you even think of buttering me up?" she interrupted before calming down. "You don't need to push yourself this hard. Will you please take it easy this one time?" Naruto sighed before taking her into small hug, which was returned after a small pause. "I'll be fine, trust me. I've gotten used to what I've been trying to do and I need all the practice I can get." He felt her sigh into his shoulder. "Just please promise to be extra careful, alright? I really don't need to see you coming back looking like you were thrown into a garbage disposal." He squeezed her reassuringly. "Promise." He pulled back and said, "I'll get back as soon as I can." "You better." She gave him another quick hug and returned back to the kitchen where Tucci was not so stealthily watching. The two males made eye contact and the elder Ichiraka made a shooing gesture with an encouraging smile. Naruto nodded and parted the flaps of the shop's entrance to make his way east. Looked at his retreating back and let out a final sigh before turning to get started on washing the dishes at the back of the kitchen. "It never changes," a middle-aged mother with her young son on the stool next to her let out wistfully. "What doesn't?" Tucci replied while wiping the counter. The woman nudged her head to the entrance. "Saying goodbye to your loved ones as they go away on a mission. I should know, my husband is a huntsman, and he's out of the kingdom at the moment." Tucci looked thoughtful for a moment, then turned slightly to see his daughter tensely scrubbing a pot while completely stone-faced. He looked back to the mother and said, "I suppose so. But as long as he's still around to say goodbye to, we'll be fine." The wind always felt great against his face. It never failed in giving a sense of freedom and adventure to the day ahead, or evening in his case. From rooftop to rooftop he continued running and jumping to his heart's content, feeling his hyperactive giddiness rejuvenate with every leap and pulse of aura to his feet. Some of those on the streets below gave notice as they watched the yellow and orange blur go by overhead, but most if not all were used to it. None were unfamiliar with the more eccentric tendencies a huntsman or huntress might display, but Naruto seemed to have cemented his presence over the years, enough to be ignored or even given a small greeting if the mood permitted it. Arriving at the edge of the commercial district, Naruto leaped off the roof of a small tailor shop and landed on the other side of the street. He took a second to lean his elbows on the guardrail bordering one of the many cliffs that separated each of Vale's districts. A large body of water was in front of him, one that connected westward to the vast ocean and directly toward the large island of Patch, a place still on his bucket list to visit properly someday. To the east, however, simply made him smile before he took the initiative and vaulted over the safety rail to leap off the side of the rocky ridge. He heard a few squeaks of surprise from some bystanders behind him, but didn't pay them any mind. He was sure that they would just dub his actions as simple huntsman things, and they would be right to an extent since he wasn't exactly a student yet, let alone an official monster slayer. To an outsider his little 200-foot freefall might have seemed absolutely stupid, if not outright lethal, but his face was the epitome of calmness and even excitement. Immediately after his descent he managed to easily find a solid rock large enough to hold him as his body was hugging the massive wall. He landed with a minor thud and looked to have securely stuck to the boulder without any trouble or misbalance. He continued his downward journey in the same manner with rocks of all sizes until he reached a short slope of dirt and gravel. As if riding on a snowboard he slid on the loose dirt and launched himself off the small incline and fell a short drop to the tiny beach below. After a satisfying landing he walked forward jauntily to the shore and didn't stop even when he was well within the water's domain. The thing with Naruto, though, was that his feet didn't sink. It seemed that he didn't follow the laws of nature, as he seemingly continued to walk on the ocean's surface with nary a problem or second thought. Even when the particular spot he was walking on was disturbed by a wave he rode it out calmly without losing stride. The action always made him mentally smirk. To think this was practically a mere passive ability. He smiled when one of his favorite parts of the day was upon him. To his right the sun started to set upon Vale, and he was already midway across the water. The great orb of fire cast its radiance on him and projected a sparkling sheen on the water's surface along with a magnificent yellowish-orange glow. He turned his gaze to the left, and watched as the newly colored water led to one of the highest cliffs upon which rested Beacon Academy. Imagining the water as a road of yellow brick to the castle-like school seemed to click perfectly to him for some reason, and was a sight surely to be admired by all. Letting the moment pass after the last specks of daylight wasted away he started to pick up the pace by running along the water to meet the land of the residential district. Just like before he defied logic and casually scaled up another rock face like he was taking a stroll on a sidewalk. No one noticed when he arrived at the top or even when he started another roof-hopping trip. This time he went eastward and once again scaled a cliff, one that easily matched the tallest in the area. When he reached the top at his usual spot well enough outside of the academy proper he switched to tree hopping and headed towards the emerald forest. "He's doing it again," a slightly annoyed female voice stated. A short sipping sound was what responded first. "It appears so. He's certainly a dedicated one, isn't he?" A frustrated sigh escaped the lone woman in the room. "I simply don't understand why you've let this go on for as long as it has." Shaded spectacles turned away from the live camera feed on a personal scroll to the stern woman at his side. Her light blonde hair was in its usual bun with a curl framing the right side of her pale face, almost hiding her teal earrings, while her strict green eyes behind ovula glasses stared at the scroll's holographic screen. Her crossed arms along with the rest of her torso were held in a long-sleeved white pleated blouse while bronze buttons adorned the high-waist black pencil skirt she favored above her dark stockings that led to heeled brown boots. Covering her back was a uniquely styled cape that was internally purple while black on the outside. The tattered fringes on the bottom proudly displayed shapes of fire and arrows while aligned with her shoulders for all to see was a bronze tiara symbol above a line of similarly colored diamond-shaped beads. The last notable thing about her was her weapon firmly squeezed in her right hand. It wasn't a sharp blade of some sort or other kind of deadly instrument, but was in fact a black and purple riding crop. "I'm sure you can think of something, Glinda." A hint of a smile made its way onto the male's sharp face. "By this point you should have some inkling of an idea." Glinda moved to place her hands on her hips and gazed into his thinly open brown eyes. "That's just the thing. Even now I still don't know exactly what's going on in that mind of yours, Ojban." The silver-haired man sounded out an amused grunt while adjusting the green cowl around his neck and taking a moment to play with the cross-shaped pin attached to it. "Care to take a guess anyway?" The blonde rolled her eyes before she started waving her riding crop nonchalantly in the air while she said, "Oh, probably something to do with a huntsman's potential and embracing his youthful spirit, or something else along those lines." Ojban kept his small grin and shrugged his shoulders carelessly. "Sure, let's go with that." Glinda looked at him blankly but couldn't retort when the man now looking at his scrolls spoke again. It seems it's going to be another pack of beowulfs tonight," he said as if talking about the weather. "All the more reason to stop him before he does something stupid and gets himself seriously injured. No one other than official huntsmen, huntresses or students with permission are allowed to be in the forest near school grounds. You give Mr. Uzumaki too little credit." "I know you've been watching his progress as well as I have and it's easy to see he's certainly grown," he replied while watching the young man in question leap from a tree branch and straight into the pack of Grim. "He definitely has the spirit to become a fine huntsman someday." It'll be interesting to see how far he'll progress. He took that time to take another sip of his favorite brew. That doesn't mean he can blatantly break the rules as he pleases. Are you even the tiniest bit concerned about what would happen if the public found out you were letting someone not even in combat school face grim like this? The headmaster brought his mug to his lips once again, secretly enjoying how annoyed the blonde looked at his laid-back attitude. Not in the least, he replied easily. The huntress looked ready to lash out again but didn't let her emotions get the better of her. Instead, she let out a big exhale and rubbed her temple to ward off any hint of an oncoming headache. At the very least, can we take some sort of precaution in case he comes across something he can't handle? Just watching him shouldn't be enough to ensure safety. When she didn't get a response, she opened her eyes and looked at the tousled silver hair on the back of Ojban's head, showing his eyes were completely glued to the live video. Professor Ojban? She questioned. What the blonde couldn't see was the male's smile widening just a tad at seeing the enthusiastic Naruto suddenly becoming enveloped in an orange glow as he faced down a few leaping Beowulfs. Looks like he's finally gotten the hang of it, he mumbled to himself. Professor Ojban? The woman stated a bit more sternly, his attention back to his companion. Ojban merely graced her with the barest of glances as he said, "Oh, you need not worry." He pressed the holographic screen to bring in another feed in a split-screen view. "He's well supervised, I assure you." Not knowing what he meant, Glinda took a step forward and looked down at the scroll. What her eyes saw made her internally groan as she brought her hand back up to cover her green orbs in exasperation. "I don't necessarily think that's supposed to calm my nerves," she groused. "Did you know about this? What are you trying to accomplish?" Ojban was silent, but the easygoing atmosphere he exuded spoke volumes. "It's like you said. Maybe I'm just trying to see potential blossom from a youthful spirit. It is basically what our positions are about, isn't it? Within proper means, yes. This off-the-books activity isn't something that should be encouraged and could lead to trouble," she replied smoothly. Ojban turned his seat to her. "Wouldn't be the first time we've had to keep secrets," Glinda sighed. "You know what I mean." Yet again another sip. "Don't worry too much. It'll all be fine." The man looked back at his scroll and relaxed himself in his seat, looking all like the calm professional his black suit and natural presence permitted him. "Now enjoy the little show he's putting on. It looks like he finally managed to control one of the abilities he's been struggling with. Seems he's been practicing somewhere else since the last time he's been in Emerald Forest." Even if her face didn't show it, Glinda was at least a bit interested in the young man's development. After seeing so much trial and error, why not see the fruits of his labor and quell her curiosity? "Let's see if he manages to not blast himself through a tree this time," she stated. He could never hold in his excitement whenever his skills were properly put to the test, especially if the fight he was in wasn't overly life-threatening, and he remained in control. Thankfully, he was able to use that excitement to fuel his combat hardiness and focus instead of being sloppy and impatient. This was unfortunate for the pack of Grimm he was engaged in battle with, as shown by one of the young Beowulfs having its right arm slashed off by the same blade that immediately found its tip stabbed through its canine skull and out the bottom of its jaw. With a quick squelch, the short blade was pulled out of the quickly fading body before its dull side was gingerly rested on the blonde's shoulder. "All right, which one of you ugly bastards want to go next?" Naruto hollered with a mischievous smirk plastered on his face. The only response he got were growls from about a dozen sources, yet he wasn't deterred at all. These were relatively young and therefore less tactful examples of their species, so there wasn't much to worry about as long as he didn't make any stupid mistakes. Even so, it seemed they learned at least a little bit as three decided to quickly charge in together as opposed to the one-on-one fight that ended quickly prior. Seeing the perfect opportunity, Naruto prepared himself as he stood still. Almost instantly a protective shield of orange energy surrounded his body, and the light it protruded seemed to move wavily in several layers before it settled into one solid cover. It was almost unnoticeable if not for the occasional sparkle of orange shining on random parts of his body. His opponents didn't notice the action, or they simply didn't care enough to deem it a threat, so they pressed on with full intent to kill. When they were within striking distance, they lashed out with claws extended, one going for his face while the other two went for his left and right side. Even with the attacks coming, Naruto didn't falter or even attempt to raise his weapon now placed at his side. That was all well and good to the oncoming Grimm, but they didn't expect the outward force and simultaneous orange flash that blasted them backwards once their claws tried to pierce the young man's skin. Now stunned on the ground, the three monsters didn't have a chance to defend themselves from the quick execution of slashes to their throats, ending their lives and making their bodies start to evaporate in shadowy flakes and wisps. With those three gone, Naruto decided to cut any more waiting and charged right at the other snarling beasts that started to surround him. With a quick battle cry, he and one of the creatures quickly met in the small clearing they were engaging each other in. Predictably, the Beowulf tried to slash at him with its claws, but the whiskered teen deflected their sharp points to the side with the metal plate on the back of his left hand. Before the beast could attack again, Naruto thrust his right hand forward, punching it in the jaw with the blunt handguard on the blade's handle covering his fingers. Its face knocked to the side. Naruto took the opening and fatally stabbed it straight through its chest. Not wasting any time, Naruto spun himself, and the Grimm still stuck on his blade around to block another clawed attack. Withdrawing his weapon from the dead Beowulf, the blonde jumped high over the corpse and chopped the head off of his next opponent, looking like a human guillotine as he came down with a downward cut on the back of its neck. Half of his enemies now defeated. Naruto surrounded his body once again with a quick glint of orange aura and charged at 3 others. The dark monster up front tried to sink its jaws into the blonde, but Naruto simply leaned forward with his shoulder like he was going for a tackle. What happened instead was both satisfying to the lone human and deadly to one of the many monsters of Remnant. The moment their bodies made contact, an orange flash once again enveloped the dark area before the Beowulf was launched back to where it came from. With the speed behind Naruto's run, there was more force put into the controlled blast, causing his opponent to crash into the 2 others along with one of the many nearby trees. Splintered wood resembled shrapnel as the 3 bodies halved the large trunk instantaneously. Some luck seemed to watch over Naruto as 2 of the Grimm started fading away once the dust settled, one from a visibly broken neck while the other had a particularly big chunk of wood piercing its sternum. The creature that took the force of the orange blast firsthand was slow to get up, ultimately costing it when Naruto quickly launched forward and roughly stuck his weapon through the natural white armor on its cranium. Satisfied with the Grimm's sudden stillness, Naruto moved to take the blade out of his kill, but found the angle a little awkward and started to annoyingly struggle. It took a few adjustments and a couple of hard pulls, but he got it out with a rough cleaving sound. Righting himself from the short wobble, the blonde weighed his partner in crime in his hand and muttered, "This will all be easier when I finally get you to a forge soon." He didn't feel any of the other Beowulfs behind him move to attack and smirked. "And you'll be an even bigger threat than you are now, won't you, sweetheart?" He rubbed the metal fondly and was about to turn around to attack the rest when a sudden presence made itself known. He didn't see what happened right away, but he sure as hell heard it. 2 quick slashes through flesh followed by a loud bang shook his ears and the surrounding forest. Realizing the intruder was definitely not just another Grimm, Naruto slowly turned around to gauge the possible threat. The shattered moon in the night sky shined its light on a single man standing in front of the 3 fading Beowulfs, and the first thing that caught the blonde's eye was the weapon he wielded. It was an intimidating single-edged great sword relaxingly held in his right hand. The long handle was red, the blade and handguard silver, and the hilt interestingly filled with some sort of cog system being black. When Naruto looked closer, he saw what looked like 2 gun barrels still letting out some smoke resting on either side of the large blade. The man himself had graying black hair, a pale complexion with a slight stubble lining his jawline, a tattered red cloak hanging over his back, a gray dress shirt that had a long tail, and black dress pants and dress shoes. The blonde could also barely make out the reflection of several rings on his right hand along with the crooked cross-shaped pendant around his neck. The last feature that was taken in were the crimson eyes he had that seemed to be taking him in as well. After the stranger sized Naruto up, the weapon retracted to a more manageable traveling size and was placed securely at his lower back. After the quick action, the 2 males simply stared at one another. Naruto was tense since it didn't take more than a few brain cells to realize the man was a fully fledged huntsman, and who knows what kind of trouble could come of this. The man, however, looked utterly calm and didn't really show any outward emotion. The silence was agonizing to Naruto, but it kept prolonging until the huntsman reached behind him and pulled out a flask. He took a long swig from it, and gave out a satisfied sigh when he was done. Another moment of silence passed until the man gestured to the flask and spoke. "You want some?" he asked in a slightly scratchy and naturally slurred voice. Naruto didn't know what to say. He sounded in reply. "Well, too bad because it's all gone," the man quickly interrupted as he gave the empty flask a quick shake to show what remained of its contents before he put it back in its proper place. "What are you doing out here, kid?" Naruto didn't speak immediately but found his voice after a moment. "It's a little obvious, isn't it?" he countered. The older man gave a quick once-over to what was left of the fading Grimm in the clearing and indifferently shrugged. "I suppose it is. I guess the real question is why." Naruto gave his own shrug and mirrored the man's laid-back posture. "Have to stay in shape somehow. And with that little machete of yours you thought you might as well slay some monsters in the middle of the night by yourself?" Naruto looked down at the short and straight blade. His right hand squeezed the comfortable black grip protected by the melee-capable handguard of the same color, while his left fingers tenderly ran themselves along the blade's black body, sharp and silver edge, and the curved tip. "Not all of us need to overcompensate for something," Naruto replied easily. A hint of a smirk showed on the man's face while a small chuckle rang from his throat. "All I'm hearing is jealousy. But I guess you have to work with what you got." Naruto felt a grin of his own form from the wordplay. Well, he tried to talk again but flinched when the huntsman was suddenly in his face with the great sword drawn. A loud clang echoed when the blonde managed to block the attempted slash on his person with both hands holding his weapon firmly. With arms slightly buckled, Naruto quickly pushed away and backed up a couple of steps. What the hell was that for? Like before, the man was calm with the exception of a raised brow. He retracted his weapon to half its size once again and put it away. Good reaction time and some decent muscle, he muttered to himself. What are you going on about, old man? This time there was more of a reaction in the form of a small frown and the twitch of a brow. First of all, it's Qrow, not old man. Second, why should I tell a rude brat anything? Why, because how the hell am I the rude one? You attacked me, Databeo. Qrow broke his frown and simply looked a little curious while whispering Databeo to himself questionably. He broke that train of thought and gave Naruto a slow realization expression. Oh yeah, he slurred, still rude though. The blonde was at a loss for words. He didn't have the slightest clue on how to judge the situation. Should he just run? Attack him in return? No, that would probably end with him getting his ass kicked, and while the guy really reeked of alcohol now that he thought about it. That sort of explains his mannerisms, but doesn't exactly help the situation much. Getting to the point, Naruto asked, so what now? HM? Am I in trouble or something? Qrow took a second to hum to himself. Probably not, he answered. Wait, seriously? Yep. So am I free to go? Pretty much. Oh. Naruto blinked a few times and steadily sheathed his blade into its leather home. Welp, I guess I'll go then. Naruto carefully turned and began to walk, taking a moment or two to look over his shoulder every few steps to make sure the man didn't move to follow him. It was when he was about to reach the heavier foliage that Qrow talked again. You know, trespassing on some major private property isn't exactly good to have on record, especially for someone who wants to be a huntsman. His voice stopped Naruto dead in his tracks. You never know when someone might have a reason to sabotage the initiation grounds, or maybe even map out the area to attack the school or something. And who said I was doing that? Naruto called out after a pause. Qrow shrugged. No one, but the possibility is still there, and that alone is a huge concern for any self-respecting huntsman academy. Blankly looking at the screen, Glinda plainly asked, and how concerned are you? Ajban smiled. I'm not, and Qrow knows it. Can't I just get a warning or something? Isn't that how these things usually go? Naruto replied. You're saying that as if this is the first time you've been out here. Naruto quickly turned and faced him. And how do you wave to the audience, kiddo? Qrow interjected while casually waving to a nearby boulder. What? The blonde uttered before quickly walking to the waist-high rock and leaning in for a closer look. It was hard to pick out at first, but he was able to barely see a concealed camera refocusing its lens as his face got close. Naruto stepped back and silently took in the information. Well, sure, yep. Qrow stood next to him and planted his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Like I said on record. And what does that exactly mean for me? Naruto asked while blankly staring at the camera. Can't say for certain. Different kingdoms mean different rules. Qrow broke physical contact and innocently looked at the moon while exaggerating a thinking posture. Could have possibly been shot on sight in Atlas, accepted with open arms and a gift basket in Vacuo. And I wouldn't put it past some of those cultural types in Mistral to ask you how you felt while fighting and then writing a poem about it. That was a very simplistic way of putting it given Atlas's militaristic outlook, Vacuo's acceptance of those that could survive in their harsh environment, and Mistral's very artistic community, although for the latter that only really applied to the upper class of the population. Not that Qrow cared. He just said what his buzzed mind could quickly think of. And Veil? Naruto sounded. Qrow shrugged and lazily looked at him over his shoulder. You'll probably see soon enough. What's that supposed to mean? Hell if I know, Qrow replied. With hands in his pockets he started to walk away towards the clearing where he made his entrance. Then why did you even come out here, Databayo? Naruto called to the retreating man. To get into my head before you assassinate me or something? Or something, the man retorted casually, and continued his leisurely stroll. That doesn't help anything, Databayo. Gesundheit. Qrow exclaimed before his body disappeared into the forest. I didn't sneeze! Naruto yelled. After letting out an aggravated sigh, the blonde teen pseudo-glared down at the rock camera and pointed at it. If I get killed, I'm gonna haunt the ever-loving hell out of whoever's watching. And trust me, I know I can be an annoying ghost. He then walked backwards while still pointing and gave his best I'm warning you stare until he was officially out of its range of sight. Now making his way back home after the little bit of excitement, all that could be heard from Naruto were some mutterings about some of his possible ghostly provocations, such as hiding someone's scroll or turning a sink faucet on in the middle of the night just enough to wake the home's occupants up or even force them to leave the comfort of their bed because they suddenly had to relieve themselves. Yeah, that'd show whoever was messing with him that he meant business. Sadly, thoughts about ghosts and the paranormal in general didn't mix well with a walk in a dark and dangerous forest. What was the point of involving Qrow? Glinda asked. Ajban leveled his gaze on the screen while his many security cameras kept up with the wandering teen as he started his tree-hopping journey back towards the general public of Veil. The blonde also seemed a little on edge as he rapidly looked around at his quickly passing surroundings warily. The headmaster didn't think the change in mood had anything to do with their viewing of him, so he mentally shrugged it off. Simply making a connection. For what exactly? With him taking care of the Beowulfs that easily, it doesn't seem like he'll have any trouble passing the combat tests. Ajban sipped his mug. All around the world there are many talents just waiting to come into their own. Whether they are able to grow by themselves or with some instruction doesn't mean they can't get a little push once in a while to help them become something greater. But why him? She didn't have anything necessarily against the young man, well, besides his apparent lack of attention to rules, but she was genuinely curious. Let's just say I have a good feeling and leave it at that. He watched as Naruto continued his anxious jumping through the trees. The blonde's tempo was completely halted, however, as a flying squirrel whizzed on by his face, causing him to simultaneously reach for his weapon in panic, while also tripping over a branch. The result was him letting out a shout of fright as he careened towards some bushes below. Watching dust and leaves explode from where Naruto made his rough landing, all Ajban said was, something greater indeed. Naruto, I need you over here. Tucci shouted from the living room of his small upstairs home. It was a mere hour before he was going to open shop, and what he saw on his computer immediately got his full attention. The sound of footsteps followed by a yawn was heard from the hallway. "What is it, old man? You know I like to sleep in whenever I get back late." The elder Ichiraku turned in his chair to meet Naruto's drowsy eyes. "I'm pretty sure you already had your 8 hours since you got back at midnight." Naruto shrugged. "I'm a growing boy." Teuchi mentally rolled his eyes. "Anyway, that's not important. Do you have anything planned today?" The blonde blinked. "Besides the usual, not really." "Good, because I have a very important delivery for you." Naruto walked up to the computer screen that was mainly used for the business. He could easily make out the online order page that was occasionally used by people wanting to make a quick pickup or even delivery if his availability permitted it. Naruto leaned over Teuchi's shoulder and began muttering the information to himself. "Let's see, 5 bowls, so it's not some catering thing. And it was ordered by..." Naruto's eyes widened. "Qrow Brahmin? Oh crap, exactly how much info did the drunk have? Do you know him?" Teuchi asked after being startled from the outburst. Sorta. And what does sorta mean?" Ayam questioned while walking in from her room, white uniform on and blue apron tied securely around her waist. "He might be a huntsman that I may have run into at the forest last night." "Wait, you were caught? What happened?" the woman sternly asked. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. "Pretty much nothing. Nothing at all," she questioned with her hands on her hips. "It was just some random talk." "About?" Naruto chuckled sheepishly. "I'm not sure exactly. There was some stuff about weapons, the kingdoms, punishments like being shot, but it's okay," he proclaimed in a rush when he saw Ayam's eyes expand in fear. "I'm pretty sure nothing is going to happen. I think the worst that can happen is blackmail." "Why?" Teuchi inquired calmly. "Well, it turns out I've been watched for a while in the Emerald Forest. Apparently there's cameras all over the place, and from how he was talking, Beacon is definitely aware." He nervously smiled and tried to weakly laugh it off. Ayam sighed. "I knew this was going to blow up in your face one day. Hey, look. I didn't get any threatening vibes from the guy, so there's probably nothing to worry about." He paused. "Well, he did try to cleave me in half with his giant sword." Moving on. He swore he was heightening the poor girl's blood pressure by the second if her facial expression was anything to go on. "What makes this so important?" he asked Teuchi, hoping to get back on track before Ayam got on his case again. "Oh right," Teuchi started. "What makes it so important is what he wrote in the special request box." Naruto leaned towards the screen once again and read where he left off. "Okay, if I get it there within an hour after opening, then wait, he's offering to pay how much?" he shouted. "It's just 5 bowls. Why is there a comma in the price?" "I don't know, but if you do this it'd be a nice profit," Teuchi replied. "And how do you know he's not just messing with us?" Naruto questioned skeptically. Teuchi opened up another tab, this time showing a bank account. "Because he already forwarded the money, but it's only pending until it's delivered on time. If it isn't, then with such a small order it wouldn't be a problem to demand a refund for being unsatisfied." "Okay," Naruto muttered a little more confidently. "I don't know what he's playing at, but this could be easy money." "That's just the thing. It won't be as easy as you think, even with your speed." Teuchi pointed to the last bit of info on the screen. Naruto looked closely before leaning back in slight confusion. "He wants me to go to patch? Omake, the hero Veil doesn't deserve or need." It was another normal morning for Ayame Ichiraku in her small family ramen stand. She was setting up everything in the kitchen with practiced precision alongside her father, and all was looking up to be busy as usual, even more so since it was the weekend. They both had a nice rhythm going with the chopping of ingredients and the kneading of the dough that would become their signature ramen. It was when the young brunette was about to pick up the prepared dough that she and her father heard some muffled shouting from upstairs. Knowing the exuberance of their other resident, there wasn't much of a reaction, yet Ayam went to check just to be safe. As she made her way up the stairs and past the living room, the excited ramblings continued and were getting louder. When she reached the last door in the hallway, she gave 2 firm knocks. "Naruto, what are you doing in there?" she called. "Ayam. You gotta see this," the boy shouted with unrestrained enthusiasm. Curiosity piqued, the girl twisted the knob and opened the door. The room was the same as the last time she saw it, with the bed unkempt, some articles of clothing here and there, and a small leaning tower of comic books placed on the dresser. But the room's resident wasn't in sight. "Naruto, up here!" Ayam let out a small shriek of surprise as the voice came from above her. She immediately looked up and was frozen where she stood. There, somehow standing completely upside down on the ceiling, was Naruto. He had a big megawatt smile highlighting the remaining baby fat and whiskers on his 12-year-old face. "How are you doing that?" Ayam yelled. "I don't know, but it's awesome. I tried to kill a bug on the wall with my foot, and I somehow stuck before I walked up. This must be what a semblance is. It's like I have superpowers." He took the time to crouch and maintained his position with a squinted, thinking expression. "I should come up with a name if I'm going to become some sort of superhero huntsman, though. Maybe Man Spider." Or he stood and let his unzipped orange windbreaker fall. He grabbed the bottom hem of either side and spread it out, giving the impression that he had wings. Manbat. Defender of Dash. Sadly, at that point whatever was keeping Naruto stuck decided to fail, causing the blonde boy to experience gravity's unforgiving laws as he fell flat onto his back. Following the loud bang of the impact on the floor was the audible wheezy groan that usually came after someone got the wind knocked of them. Naruto, are you okay? The older teen shouted in worry as she doted on the blonde and rested his head on her lap. Taking a moment to get his lungs under control, Naruto hoarsely muttered, though the world isn't ready for me yet. Having felt the moment pass, Ayame smiled and calmly raked her fingers through his spiky hair. I don't think it ever will be. Chapter 2, Patching Things Up. Sounds of hurried footsteps and the metallic clangs of various cooking utensils rang throughout the modest ramen kitchen. Tochi and Ayame were working strenuously trying to get the 5-bowl order done quickly in order to give Naruto as much extra traveling time as possible. The blonde himself was patiently waiting near the counter with his usual attire of orange and black after a fresh shower, which reminded him that he forgot to pick up some of his own shampoo while he and Ayame were shopping the day before. As he watched the duo make the final preparations, he couldn't help but have his arms crossed and foot tapping as he thought of what this all meant for him. At first he simply shrugged off the weirdness of the events from the previous night and the new development the following morning, but when one settles into a shower they always turn into a deep thinker on par with serious philosophers, and think he did. Honestly, what was this Qrow guy doing? There wasn't really any hostility besides that one strike he had to block, but he did it with an almost uninterested and laid-back demeanor, as if the whole thing wasn't any big deal at all. Was that some sort of test, or did he get a kick out of messing with people? Given some stories about some of the more peculiar huntsmen, he wouldn't completely count out the latter. Even so, this whole thing was confusing to him, but he supposed that ordering ramen to meet wasn't exactly the worst thing that could happen. Some of the scenarios he thought up consisted of a lot more mental and physical trauma, so he'd readily take getting paid for something he's done plenty of times even with a time limit attached. Okay, ready. Ayame called out, snapping Naruto out of his thoughts while she securely placed the tightly sealed bowls into a backpack for him to carry. And just before opening, Tochi commented while wiping his hands on a small towel. Everything else is all you, Naruto. The blonde walked over to the bag before properly placing it over his shoulders while minding the sheathed blade already residing there. Alright, so an hour shouldn't be too bad, he stated. Hopefully it isn't, but make sure to be careful while you get there. We don't need you arriving with time to spare only to show that you spilled everything, Ayame stated sternly. Naruto shrugged. It's not like I have much room to be careful in the first place. Taking a boat would be too slow to risk, so I have to go on the water myself. Have you walked on water that long? Tochi asked. Nope, but first time for everything, I guess. Just do your best. Ayame stepped closer to look up and straight into the blonde's eyes. I don't know what this Qrow wants, but you need to keep an eye on him. I don't care if he's a veil huntsman, always be suspicious and watch your back. Naruto rolled his eyes a little. Okay, Mom. He chuckled to himself. Come on, don't worry yourself too much. You're gonna give yourself a heart attack before you're 30. The brunette smacked his shoulder lightly. I wouldn't have to worry if you didn't attract so much trouble. Tochi meanwhile quietly nodded and scrunched up his face in agreement with his daughter, but ultimately went unnoticed. The teen male playfully scoffed. I'll be fine, alright? He tapped the handle of his weapon. Besides, I got little Miss Sharp and Pointy here to tear him a new one if anything happens. Didn't you say he had a giant sword? Ayame questioned. Yeah, and he seemed older and way more experienced than you. Your point? Ayame blankly looked at him and gently patted his whiskered cheek a couple of times before walking away to open the shop. Yeah, good luck with that. The blonde watched her walk away quietly before saying, You know, your lack of confidence in me isn't exactly helping. You don't need it. You always find some crazy way to get out of things. She cried back. A little extra support doesn't hurt, though, he muttered. Tochi chuckled and firmly placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. You don't need us to say anything. You know that we're always here when you need us, whether that be wishing you luck or making bail if you overstep your boundaries. What the hell's that supposed to mean? Tochi started pushing him towards the entrance hurriedly. Now go. You're already wasting daylight. After regaining his footing next to Ayame as she was lifting the metal security gate at the storefront, he checked to make sure he had everything he needed. Nodding to himself in satisfaction, he walked past the curtained flaps and into the sunshine of the streets. Ayame followed him out and said, Come back in one piece. Naruto gave her a cheeky grin. We'll see. He then quickly applied aura to his feet and leaped onto the roof of the building across the street, and started making his way west, towards the docks. The woman watched him disappear from sight near instantaneously, and sharply blew a lingering bang of hair away from face. Yep, a heart attack before 30. I should have done this a long time ago. Naruto shouted in excitement as he slid down the surface of a particularly large wave caused by a passing passenger ship coming from Patch. Those leaning over the rail watching him seemed to share in his emotion as he received a few whistles and yells in encouragement. The cocky smirk he wore as result, however, did change to a pure smile of nostalgic happiness when he glanced over and saw several kids gaze at his actions in complete awe, causing him to give a wave in greeting. The way one of them was simultaneously pointing at him and excitedly grabbing the sleeve of his father reminded him of himself as a kid, watching the Vital Festival tournament for the first time, and seeing some of the amazing things the competing huntsmen and huntresses were able to do. It was one of the points in his younger life that kick-started his aspirations to become a huntsman among other things, and if he just did the same for someone else at that age then he felt pretty damn good about it. That is, of course, as long as the kid isn't stupid like him and decides to chase down big scary monsters deep in the forest. Other than that, the kid was golden if he decided to pursue that path. The moment passed when the ship started getting further away while his running settled onto calmer waters. If he was right about how long it had been so far, then he had a pretty good shot of making the delivery on time. That'd only happen if he kept up his pace, but he was sure he could keep going strong with the remaining aura he had. As confident as he was still feeling the effort he was putting in. Usually it'd take a lot of fighting beforehand to even get him tired, and even more so to drain his aura to the point where its natural barrier faded away. But keeping a constant focus on the flow of energy to his feet was slowly but surely wearing him down. It wasn't necessarily anything to worry about. It was just something slightly foreign to him since it didn't happen often. Hell, if he wanted to, he could use this as some sort of regular training exercise to make him more of a tank than he already was. That would have to wait though, since the large island of Patch just entered his vision and was steadily becoming larger. Time to see what you want, old man. Where the hell is this house supposed to be? Naruto exclaimed in frustration as he tree-hopped through the forest that covered a large majority of the island. He already expected it to be a bit of a pain to find considering he wasn't given an exact address and didn't know the area, but the vast forestry and various dirt paths to choose from didn't help at all. And the prick only said it was a log cabin north of the city and that I couldn't miss it, damn it. At this point he was already feeling the sweat become more apparent on his face, one part from the physical exertion, while the other from his increasingly rising nerves. He was running low on time and quickly at that if the clock tower he spotted in the city earlier was anything to go by. So on he went, desperately sprinting in every direction possible, hoping to catch an inkling of a clue. He tried climbing up a tree to see anything resembling his target, but the woods were too thick. Thankfully, it was when he was at the point of almost absolute surrender that he chanced by a small farmhouse with an elderly couple that pointed him in the right direction. After that he raced off with a hurried thanks and panic settling into his mind. Every second that went by was agonizing, but he knew he had to keep pushing forward since he'd already come this far. If not for the money, then he at least wanted to fulfill his curiosity over the whole matter. It took forever in his mind, but he finally found the correct path to the house that was described to him. Come on, come on, come on! He chanted to himself as he made the final march to his destination. Once he broke the tree line and entered the clearing that was the main property, he had to admit that the place looked a lot better than he thought it was going to be, with a sizable two-story cabin house, a neat little shed nearby, a flower garden lining the building's front wall along with a porch and large chimney on its left side. It was easy to imagine the place as a really peaceful family setting, one many would be grateful to ever have. Naruto actually slowed his pace to barely a jog once he got close to admire the area and settled into a walk for the last few steps to the front entrance. With an exaggerated exhale to signify the end of his journey, he raised his fist and gave the wooden door several firm knocks. The silence was deafening for a moment, but it ended quickly as he heard cool and composed footsteps approach. The knob soon turned and the form of Qrow Branwen was revealed. Once the door was fully open, the two males stared at each other with blank expressions, one with slight annoyance and sweat and the other with utter tranquility and even boredom. Naruto didn't know how to proceed, but Qrow broke the standstill by reaching into his front pants pocket and taking out his scroll. Once the older man glanced at the holographic screen, he looked at the blonde with a hint of amusement in his red eyes as he said, "Well then, you actually made it with seconds to spare. Not bad, kid. Could have been better, but I'm not one to complain. It would have been if you gave better directions, ya geezer," Naruto uttered with disdain and narrowed eyes. Qrow didn't seem outwardly affected by his words, which only annoyed Naruto more. While putting away his scroll, Qrow said, "If you want to be a huntsman, then you have to be resourceful and prepared to make do with whatever information you get your hands on. Anyway, step inside and make yourself comfortable. You might be here for a while." Without waiting for a response, Qrow turned and walked back into the family home. Naruto, having a face clearly showing he wanted to start rattling off questions, resigned to falling into the older man's steps as he closed the door behind him. "Take a seat on the couch. I'll be back in a little bit." "Oh," Qrow reached into his back pocket before tossing a small towel at Naruto that was caught easily. "And clean yourself up. Figured running a marathon would have worked up a sweat." The huntsman then made his way through the closest doorway, which led to the kitchen. Naruto followed him and saw that he was heading towards another door that led to what he guessed was the porch outside. "Seriously, you're just leaving me here after all that?" Naruto asked irritably. With a squeak, the door was opened halfway as Qrow glanced back at the blonde. "Patience, brat. If you put in the effort to get this far, then I'm sure you can take a second to relax. We'll talk real soon," he replied smoothly before closing the door as he made his exit. Naruto stood in place for a moment until he rolled his eyes with a small huff of annoyance and made his way to the living room couch. He plopped onto the dark green piece of furniture and set down his sheathed blade and backpack at his feet. Once a few seconds of silence passed, he was already getting tired of it. He normally could appreciate some relaxation, but with his objective and hardly contained curiosity heavily lingering in the back of his mind, he was getting jittery. With nothing else to do, he simply took in what the room contained, such as a couple of wooden bookshelves, cupboards, end tables with lamps resting on top, and the fireplace. A few photographs of varying landscapes lined the walls, giving off a good hint that the resident or residents of the cabin home traveled a good deal. Naruto figured everything else interesting about the home continued up the staircase at the end of the room, but he obviously wouldn't pry lest he feel he was sticking his nose where it shouldn't. The only other things left to take notice of were the coffee table right in front of him, and the TV stand not that much farther, which held a standard holographic projector, found in most family homes. Figuring there was not much else to do, he might as well watch the news or something while he waited. Sadly, it wasn't to be, since he couldn't find the remote anywhere nearby. He checked around the projector itself, all of the shelves and other wooden furniture, and even underneath the couch and its removable cushions. Not willing to put up with the short search much longer, Naruto simply gave up and let himself drop back onto the middle of the couch. His souring mood made itself prominent on his whiskered face as he sunk low to the point where his head was no longer higher than the backrest, and his chin forcibly rested on the upper part of his chest from the awkward angle. He didn't care, though. He was simply content to remain in this position until Qrow made his return. However, whatever approaching thoughts about the huntsman were quickly halted when the blonde felt a weight suddenly place itself on his head. The young man was alarmed for a moment but didn't let it show. Instead, all he did after a couple of seconds was slowly raise his curious blue eyes upward. What he saw wasn't something he expected on this trip. Looking down at him with a remote held in what looked like a smiling mouth was a black and white furred face. With the familiar rhythmic breathing, snout, and elongated ears, there was no doubt about what was happening. There was a corgi on his head. The canine barked a hello, dropping the remote onto his chest. Awesome. Yeah, the kid made it, Qrow stated into his scroll held at his ear. Without taking a boat? Replied a male voice on the other end of the cellular device. Yeah. Figured he could use some of that tree-sticking stuff on water, so I guess I was right. Didn't really expect him to actually make it on time, though. Qrow took a second to step away from the tree he was leaning on out of sight from the cabin home. He gave a passing glance to some birds flying overhead as he said, "Kid's fast, I'll give him that." What's weird is that he had more than enough energy to spare from what I saw when he got here. Blondie has more juice in him than Ruby on a sugar rush. It's kinda scary when you think about it. A satisfied grunt sounded in reply. Us blondies do tend to amaze when we want to. The black-haired huntsman rolled his eyes. Don't get too much of a big head, Tai. We don't need you rubbing off more cockiness on Yang. You know how she can get. I think any effort to tone down even a little bit of that would be wasteful because, like you said, you know how she can get. A slightly accusing female voice murmured in the background. From what Qrow could tell, it was most likely his niece in question. No, we're not talking about you, and you could just put that tongue back where it came from. You and I both know that will only make Yang fight back harder, even with the simple things. I know that, but someone needs to mind their business when the adults are talking. The other male exaggeratingly replied, obviously giving the person named Yang a suggestive hint. Don't roll your eyes at me, young lady. Anyway, are you guys almost done in town? Huh? Oh yeah, almost. We just about have everything for dinner. Is whatever you're doing going to be done by then? Don't know. We'll have to see what happens. Alright then, but Yang and I might take a little longer than expected. Ruby wanted me to pick up some more baking stuff, and the store we usually go to ran out of what she needed. Wait, Ruby's not with you too? Nope. Then where is she? So what do you think? Pretty weird, right? A bark was the response. Yeah, you got a point. Naruto took that moment to eat another potato chip from the bag the small canine graciously got him from the kitchen. The dog himself, Zwei, as he revealed by pointing to the label on his water bowl, was enjoying one of the few dog treats he retrieved for himself. The fact that Zwei was seamlessly able to perform these tasks and showed the intelligence to actually hold a conversation didn't shake Naruto at all. Sometimes you just had to take things as they were and go with the flow. That's why the two of them were comfortably sitting on the couch and watching a movie that was nearing its end. It was an adaptation of one of the comics Naruto had read a while back, and the current scene was showing the last battle on the moon. If Naruto remembered right, the fight and setting was inspired by Remnant's own fractured moon and actually ended with the lunar body's round shape breaking to similarly match the real one. Still, instant space travel out of nowhere seemed a little much when I first read it. Zwei gave a softer bark this time. Yeah, it's still a cool fight. Music's good too, and I guess the ending does get to me a little even with the weirdness of it all. Zwei tilted his head and whined a little at the blonde. Wedding in the credits tugged at your heartstrings too? Well, then you should see. Home! A feminine voice gloriously shouted as the front door blasted open. Naruto tried to turn his head at the sudden disturbance, but whatever it was suddenly bolted right past him, actually creating a breeze that ruffled his hair and clothes along with Zwei's short fur. That wasn't important though, as his gaze was more focused on the trail of rose petals drifting in the air. He stared at the crimson objects with confused and blinking eyes while Zwei looked almost entirely unaffected except for the seemingly larger smile and rapidly wagging tail. It took a moment, but Naruto regained his senses and saw that the trail led up the stairs and into the hallway. What the hell was that? Naruto muttered to himself. Zwei responded with two quick and happy barks as he sat up straighter. It was but a mere few seconds later that the blur of rose petals appeared a second time, launching back down the stairs and into the living room. It followed its original path and quickly slammed the front door that was still open before turning heel and going past the duo once again. But this time it went into the kitchen and out of sight. Being hidden didn't hide the voice that started singing random lyrics with haphazard notes, however. Cookie, 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 the feminine voice started. So yummy, yummy, yummy and stuff. Starts with a C, something, something, that's good enough for me. The whiskered blonde and Cordy didn't move from their spots as this went on. Zwei kept his happy demeanor with his tongue slightly hanging out while Naruto was trying to process what just happened with the petals and what was currently occurring on the other side of the wall. That didn't stop the growing smile from forming on his face along with the urge to laugh as the random off-key singing went on. In my jammies all nice and snug like a bug in or on a rug with a jug and gonna chug. A pouring of some liquid was heard once the sporadic rhyming ended, followed by a closing of what Naruto guessed was the fridge door. After that, footsteps started to go towards the living room. I say again, Cookie, 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 starts with a ga, and there she was for Naruto to finally observe properly. From bottom to top on her petite form were simple white ankle socks, white pajama pants with pink roses decorating them, and a black tank top with a heart-shaped Beowulf design adorning the chest. In her right hand was a tall glass of milk while in her left was a plate of chocolate chip cookies that were piled a little too high, even for someone with a major sweet tooth. Atop her head was shoulder-length black hair with, interestingly enough, a red tint to it. The style and color fit her pretty well in the blonde's opinion. However, the most striking features of hers were the currently shockingly wide silver eyes staring right into his blue ones along with the embarrassed red hue that overtook every inch of her previously pale neck and face. While Naruto was able to go over all this quickly enough, the pajama-clad girl was mentally frozen with her mouth still agape as she took in the stranger. She definitely didn't know who this was, but a quick glance at Zwei was at least enough to tell her he wasn't some dangerous criminal that broke into her house. The corgi was just good at reading people like that. Even without the canine's unspoken blessing, she was sure she could zip back to her room to get her weapon if the situation required it anyway. Nevertheless, while she wasn't able to currently get her mouth or even body moving, she had to admit the male did garner a lot of curiosity from her. Randomly being in her living room aside, she wanted to ask about the whiskers for research, and also break the ice and uncover why he was here before he broke out laughing since, from the twitching smile he had going on, he was about to burst any second. Oh man, how much did he hear? This was her domain. She should be able to be weird whenever she wanted, but not with an unfamiliar audience. In order for her to get the moment going, though, she had to say something. She squeaked out and raised the plate a tad. "You want a cookie?" The nervous and high-pitched voice of the black-haired girl quickly quelled his rising urge to let out his amusement. The sight of her red face slowly lingering downward while her gaze was still locked onto his was just too much to bear and admittedly a little adorable. With her entire being practically screaming for him to say something, he cleared his throat and slowly exhaled to calm himself down. Once he got his composure under control, he grabbed the bag at his side and asked, "Want a chip?" Letting an awkward smile form on her face, she said, "Why yeah? Sure." She then found movement finally returned to her body, as she slowly walked to the couch and joined the blonde teen and dog. Once she set her goodies onto the coffee table, she sat down in silence with growing unease filling her gut. It didn't help that the whiskered male didn't say anything first, but she figured he thought that she would be the one to strike the start of the conversation considering he was the guest of sorts. Social awkwardness, please don't show up now, she thought pleadingly. So do I mean why she lightly gripped her pants in frustration and forced herself to say the first thing that came to mind to move things along. You smell like strawberries. What did I just tell you? She cursed. And just like before, Ruby's face lit up in a dark red as she could do nothing but stare at the boy's somewhat surprised face at her outburst. Why did she always have to be weird meeting new people? She was normally a little shy or something at first, but him randomly showing up and hearing her sing to herself like a buffoon on her traditional junk and jammies day didn't help at all. Naruto sounded slowly. Well, I had to use someone else's shampoo because I ran out of my own, and it's strawberry, so good knows. He scratched the back of his head and smiled as best he could. The girl was obviously embarrassed, and he didn't want to make it worse. Seeing his friend's plight, Zwei took the initiative and hopped onto her lap, reassuring her with a brief bark and nuzzling her stomach. The girl quickly relaxed and showed a more genuine smile as the red slowly left her visage. After taking a few seconds to pet the corgi affectionately, she turned to the quietly waiting male and held out her right hand, albeit with an anxiousness still surrounding her. "Hi, I'm Ruby Rose." Naruto smiled back and grasped her hand with a small shake. "Name's Naruto Uzumaki." A little bit more confidence filled Ruby's mind as she let go of his hand. "So, Naruto? Yeah? What ya doing in my house if you don't mind me asking?" she asked with a shy chuckle. The blonde hummed. "You know, I'm not exactly sure." She raised a delicate brow. "Huh? How can you not be sure? I mean, you went through the woods and everything to get here, right? You have to have some reason." A look of minor realization showed on his face before reaching to the backpack sitting next to his leg. "Well, part of the reason was to deliver these." With a quick sip he unveiled the neat pile of untarnished ramen bowls. "Damn, I'm good," he thought as he placed the bowls on the table. Ruby and Zwei leaned to get a closer look at the bowls in Naruto's hands. "What's that? Soup or something?" she asked. "Ramen, actually." You sure you got the right address?" Naruto's face showed some annoyance as he blankly looked ahead. "Yeah, pretty sure considering who ordered it. And who did that exactly? Qrow Branwen, if that's even his real name. I swear, if he made me come to some random house in the middle of nowhere, and ditch me I'm gonna. Ruby's silver eyes lit up. Qrow ordered this. Naruto looked at her. So you do know him? She nodded resolutely. Of course, he's my uncle. Your uncle? She nodded. Alright then. Noticing his tone, Ruby asked, do you know him? Naruto rolled his eyes. Hardly. It hasn't even been a full day since I ran into him, and he's playing some weird little game with me. What? What kind of game? That's just the thing. I don't know. He raised his arms up in exasperation. I mean, yeah, so what if I've been trespassing in different forests to fight Grim? Wait, what? But that doesn't mean some random huntsman can just come out of the shadows and mess with my head by being all lazily cryptic, or whatever. And now he had me race my ass. But... She interrupted. Mid-rant, Naruto looked at her questionably. No language, she affirmed and crossed her arms, all previous anxiety thrown out the window. But she emphasized with a stern whisper. Lowering his arms and looking at her with the same exasperated look he'd give I.M. when she nagged him, he continued. Fine. He had me race my butt, she nodded approvingly, all the way across the water from the middle of the commercial district of Vale with a stupid time limit attached because he was holding money over my head for my family's business. Wait, back up, she stated. What was that about fighting Grim? Calmly, Naruto replied with, oh, for the last few years or so I've been sneaking into Forever Fall and Emerald Forest to train myself up for the combat tests coming soon. No biggie. You want to be a huntsman? She asked with a smile starting to grow. Yep, ever since I was a kid. Awesome. I'm going to be a huntress. She shouted with renewed vigor, somewhat startling Naruto from her change of mood. If you've been training, doesn't that mean you do? She excitedly pointed at his rested blade. Can I see it? She requested with hardly contained excitement, as she leaned towards him. Naruto blinked. Ruby pulled back. Oh right, the classic I'll show you mine if you show me yours, be right back. Before he could respond, she handed Zwei to him and formed into a speedy ball of rose petals and launched back up the stairs. Naruto was quiet until he gave a glance over the many petals still on the ground. Man, cleaning must be a pain if she does this a lot. Zwei barked in agreement. It was but a second later that Ruby came back, but in her possession was what looked like a pretty sizable and compact mass of red metal. Setting Zwei down onto the couch, Naruto stood and unenthusiastically said, well, it's a piece of metal. Suppose that would hurt if you whack something with it. Rolling her eyes at his quick observation, she decided to let her pride and joy do the talking. After a simple adjustment, the compressed weapon quickly unveiled its deadly contents. It only took a couple of seconds and a few mechanical adjustments for the weapon to go through looking like a very hefty rifle in one instant, and then into a full-blown, intimidating curved blade in the next. After the quick transformation, Ruby easily weighed the weapon that was seemingly too big for her small frame. Meet Crescent Rose, she proudly announced. You have a frickin' scythe? Naruto walked closer and observed the more fine details etched into the metal's design. That's awesome. Just like twice before, red-colored Ruby's cheeks, but this time it was easier to manage. Heh nah, she snorted almost unnoticeably and tried to wave off his flattery. Although she is also a customizable high-impact sniper rifle, but who's asking? She finished meekly. Sure, she was doing a little bit of humble bragging, but she always loved showing off her beloved. Getting back to normal, Ruby asked, so, can I see yours? Blinking to snap his mind out of its momentary daze, he then said, oh yeah, right? Turning for a quick moment, he retrieved his sheath and presented it to the short girl before taking the blade out of its home. Despite the simplicity of the blade, Ruby was eagerly looking at it with an appreciative eye despite the obvious lack of firepower. After her appraisal, she said, wow, you've really taken care of this pretty well if you've had it for a few years. What's its name? Sheathing the weapon, Naruto replied. She doesn't have one yet, but that doesn't mean one hasn't been earned. We've been through a lot of fights together, and we're gonna have plenty more to last a lifetime. But I want to wait until after I get to a forge for her to really shine. Ruby's eyes seemed to sparkle. So you're going to upgrade? Do you know what fighting style you're going for? What about potential names? Tell me. Naruto was quickly adjusting to Ruby's changing moods pretty quickly, but he still wasn't quite ready for her to launch into his personal space and start rattling off questions, all while still lovingly holding her giant weapon of death close to her. Seeing the effect her excitement had due to his slight apprehension, she backed off and smiled apologetically. Sorry, I kinda geek out when it comes to weapons, the blonde chuckled. I noticed. Ruby smiled sheepishly. But it's alright. Being cool and composed can be boring. Ha, yeah, Ruby retracted Crescent Rose and looked back up at Naruto. But still, got any ideas? If you want, I can. Alas, the sentence couldn't finish due to the front door once again being open, but it was done much more normally this time. Both teens turned their heads and saw Qrow as he walked in and closed the door behind him. He took a moment to pause and observe the 2+ Zwei as the canine poked his head over the backrest before his gaze lingered on the red trails all over the floor. He brought his crimson eyes to meet Ruby's silver ones that seemed to know what was coming next. You know the drill, Ruby. Ugh. She groaned out dramatically as she placed her now stored weapon onto the coffee table and dragged her feet to the door under the staircase. Within a few moments she pulled out a broom and a small dustpan. With amusement clearly on his face, Naruto watched as the girl started sweeping up the petals and grumbled all the while. You know the drill, RWBY, she mocked in her best impression of her uncle before she paused to look at Qrow as she childishly said, "That's what you sound like. Just keep sweeping, kiddo. Don't want your dad coming home to see that you still haven't completely broken some old habits, do you?" Qrow replied. No, RWBY quietly sounded as she kept up her slow efforts until she saw Naruto's face and aggressively pointed at him. "And you can stop smiling at my misery." "But it's funny," the blonde retorted with the corgi barking in affirmative. "See?" Traitor RWBY whispered with narrowed eyes gazing at her dog. Zwei was undeterred. While RWBY continued her hasty cleaning, Qrow walked up to Naruto and said, "So, how you holding up?" Naruto faced him calmly and crossed his arms. "Besides being confused and annoyed, just fine. The restaurant is getting the money, right?" Qrow reacted by taking out his scroll again and tapping the screen a few times before slightly nodding in satisfaction. "There, it's through. Don't have to worry about that." Naruto nodded back. "Okay then, but I still have questions about the whole meaning of this. What, you think I just wasn't in the mood for some noodles coincidentally from the same place you work at?" Looking at him with blank blue eyes and speaking in monotone, Naruto replied with, "After being all cryptic and trying to chop me half in the forest last night, I kinda doubt that." Almost done with her sweeping, RWBY paused and leaned on the broom as she looked at the hardened huntsman. "Uncle Qrow, what's Naruto talking about? Why would you want to chop him in half? That's a little mean. Already talking so familiarly? I wasn't gone that long." "Getting to know my niece, kid?" Qrow questioned the blonde, dodging the young woman's inquiry and ignoring her confused look that followed. Naruto shrugged. "Sorta. All I've really picked up is sugar and weaponry." Qrow nodded. "Yeah, that about sums her up." "Uncle Qrow," RWBY whined as she finished her small chore. "Anyway, kid, you got a scroll?" Qrow asked, making RWBY silently huff in the background from being ignored again. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, though it's one of the older models." Reaching into a different pant pocket than before, Qrow said, "That won't do." It took only a short moment before the huntsman got what he wanted and tossed it to the team. A little surprised at first, Naruto caught the small metallic device and easily saw it was a scroll, and the latest model at that. The sleek shine and perfected hardware really showed off the genius of the minds that came together to create such an advanced form of communication, and Naruto was definitely impressed with what it was capable of from what he remembered reading about it. One of the striking functions was that its video game capabilities were way better than even a year before, and he was ready to get at it when he had the shot. He wasn't expecting to get his hands on it so soon if he was right about what Qrow just did. Seeing Naruto's confused look, Qrow said, "It's standard to give those out to students at Signal where I teach. Not saying you're a student, but we usually have a few extra that shouldn't go to waste." Filing away the information of the man being a combat school teacher, Naruto looked at him a little more seriously. "Why are you doing this?" The question was simple and asked with a little more suspicion than anything, which was understandable to both of the males, and even RWBY if her facial expression was anything to go by. Qrow put his hands in his pockets and shrugged carelessly. "This world is already full of idiots that don't know what they're doing, or maybe they do but they don't put that knowledge to good use. I'd rather not have a stupid kid running around with a deadly weapon with no proper training, especially if that kid is so dead set on protecting the kingdom me and my family happen to live in. I don't need you screwing something up for all of us further down the road, that is if you don't end up getting killed first. That's not exactly something I want on my conscience, knowing I could have done something about it." Naruto looked even more annoyingly confused while RWBY seemed to perk up with a smile behind him. "What in the hell are you talking about?" Naruto blankly asked. Before the man could answer, RWBY joined back into the conversation. "He wants to train you," she excitedly exclaimed. Naruto glanced at her with a raised brow in surprise and turned back to Qrow. "Why would you want to do that? And don't say that stuff of me being stupid, because that's definitely not the reason," he ended quickly as he practically saw the man's face preparing to sneak in some less than flattering words. Having his small amount of fun stopped, Qrow's expression became a bit more businesslike. "This'll probably only aggravate you more, but you don't need to know everything right now, especially if you haven't agreed to be taught anything. I'm not dragging you to school or something like that, so don't get your notebooks and pencils ready because it's well past too late for that. Still, if you want, I can make sure you're more than prepared to pass those entry tests, but that's all up to you." In the back of his mind he considered some sort of training as a weird possibility, but that didn't mean he was able to take this all in smoothly. "Seriously, you actually want to work with me? Look, I know the situation's pretty weird and all, but this is the real deal, and it isn't exactly something that comes about often. From experience, I've seen a lot of kids that seemed like they were going to go far but ended up losing their drive for whatever reason or simply didn't make the cut. Sure, there are just as many, if not more, that make it into the academies and even into the big leagues once they graduate. But despite that, there are still plenty that get themselves injured enough to retire or even outright killed because they didn't follow everything they've been taught." The two teens and Canine were silent at his words. They were expressed with complete sincerity despite his rough tone of voice and practically demanded that they take it all in. They had to do it relatively quick though, since he only took a short pause before he continued. "I'm going to be blunt, kid. You're good, but you can be much better with the right attention. I'm sure if you keep doing what you've been doing out there in the forest, you'll still pass the tests and make it into an academy, but doing everything yourself will only take you so far. Having someone guide or grow stronger right beside you is incredibly important, and any experienced huntsman, or huntress, can attest to that. And you're going to be that guide or whatever? Naruto started skeptically, just out of the goodness of your heart. Like I said, you don't need to know everything. The only hint I can really give is that you have eyes on you, and they've been watching closely enough to know you're not some run-of-the-mill trainee. What do you mean by that? Naruto asked. What I mean is even though you've shown that you're capable of life-threatening stupidity, you have a lot of guts and a passion a lot of people, even with all the tools given to them, don't usually bother to have. So congratulations, all those times you nearly got yourself wiped off the planet for good, whether that be from the Grim, or you just being you with that aura of yours, has paid off. Just keep in mind that's only because the right people saw. So this wasn't all your idea? No, this was brought to my attention not too long ago, so don't think I'm going to be some sort of loving instructor that jumped onto helping you and am slowly going to be some sort of father figure like in those cheesy movies. Well, that position's kinda already filled. The mother figure role is open though. Naruto then opened up his arms as if wanting a hug but had the barest of emotion showing on his face. Qrow rolled his eyes. I think I'll pass. Drunken uncle twice removed it is then, Naruto replied after letting his arms drop, earning him a pointed look from the huntsman. What, so does that mean you accept? The blonde exhaled heavily to himself. I mean, yeah, this is pretty random and all, but if it means getting an easier ticket into Beacon then it'd be stupid to not give it a shot. Besides, if my body ends up in a ditch somewhere I at least have someone to testify in my place, he ended while pointing his thumb over his shoulder at RWBY, causing her to gain a confused look from the mention of her name while she put the cleaning tools away. Qrow chuckled slightly. Trust me, if I wanted you to disappear you would already be long gone. You're not exactly making this offer sound any better, Naruto muttered. Don't care. You're already stuck with it whether you like it or not. Now then, since it seems you've accepted I got to make a call. Keep him busy, RWBY, don't need him getting lax already, Qrow stated as he made his way back out the front door. Once the entrance clicked back into place RWBY eyed the scroll still in Naruto's hand and saw an opportunity. Have you ever played Kung Fu Ninja Slayer Ultimate Death Battle? So he's accepted I take it? Yeah, he's in. I guess we'll get started whenever we're through talking, Qrow replied into his scroll. That's good to hear. I'm sure Glinda will be happy to know she doesn't have to worry about young Naruto sneaking onto Academy property anymore. Qrow smirked. And what makes you think I'm not going to just send the kid back there to annoy her? Come now. Are you really suggesting that you want to contribute to the ire of our esteemed colleague? Qrow could practically feel the smile dawning onto the headmaster's face. Oz, you're acting like I'm the only one that gets a kick out of messing with her. In fact, I'm sure the kid would like to get in on it if he met her. Perhaps, but I suppose we'll have a chance to find out at some point in the future. Not that I'm outright condoning it, just for the record. Sure you're not. What is your newest student up to now anyway? He's just hanging out in the house for a little bit with RWBY. So he's met Ms. Rose? How is she? She's fine. The two of them seem to get along well enough, which is good. RWBY could always use more friends, even more so since the brat might be here pretty often depending on what we do. And how does Taeyong feel about that? Surprisingly better than I thought. Weirdly enough, it was when I told him about the kid's training routine that he was all for bringing him around if I felt like it. Seems as long as his daughters aren't involved in something stupid he's less of a worrywart. Ashbin chuckled. Maybe his tenacity reminded him of Yang and brought out some of that fatherly concern. Qrow scoffed. Take away the whiskers and I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard convincing people that he's Tai's son. By the way, are you sure he doesn't have any fondness in him? I mean, I know you said you were pretty sure those aren't tattoos, but birthmarks is stretching it a little. You don't need to worry over such frivolous things. You can ask him yourself sometime down the road if your curiosity is that deprived. Tread carefully, though. You never know when something is more personally sensitive than you think. They can be birthmarks, or they could have been put there a long time ago, with or without his consent. You know how the world can be, especially in the rural parts of the kingdoms or completely outside their borders. Yeah, I know. Pretty sure I can leave the question to RWBY, though. I know she isn't the best at social etiquette from what you and Taeyong have mentioned, but I doubt she'll ask out of the blue like that, especially if they have only just met. Hey Naruto? RWBY asked while she kept her focused gaze onto their projected ninja duel. That didn't stop her from expertly tossing a chunk of a cookie into her mouth to be quickly devoured. Yeah? He mumbled back, fingers furiously tapping all over his scroll's screen as he was still getting accustomed to the controls. Why do you have those whisker marks? Not sure. I'm not a faunist though. I've had them forever, so I just assume they're birthmarks. Huh, okay, that's cool, aha. That's 6 games to 2. She triumphantly shouted as Zvi barked at the match's end. That's only because you've been playing longer than me. All I'm hearing are the native cries of the common whiskered loser. You're gonna eat those words. Bring it on. Well, I'm certain he's not that much better than her, Qrow continued. Getting back on track, is there anything else we need to go over? Not at the moment. Anything important that's on standby is still as such. The only new developments on our end have been the usual annual preparations of the school's curriculum. I've had enough of that over at Signal, and I'm not even there that often. You'll still gladly take the pay, I'm sure. Can't argue with that. Qrow turned and headed back to the cabin house. If that's it, then I'll let you go. If anything worth mentioning happens, I'll contact you. Be certain that you do. I feel that Naruto is going to provide plenty of interesting tales under your tutelage. If I have a completely free reign, then I can make sure he will. That is, if he doesn't disappoint. That's for you to find out then, isn't it? Goodbye, Qrow. Later, Oz. With a quick tap, the connection was cut, and the huntsman kept up his modest pace on the natural path in the forestry. Not much longer he re-entered the home and was immediately met with the hollers of the two teens. Did we seriously blow each other's arms off? Naruto shouted in a small amount of excited disbelief as he watched the latest round end on the screen. Yeah. RWBY responded with equal enthusiasm. We both activated our finishing moves at the same time and took each other out. Isn't that awesome? Having fun? Qrow interjected, causing both of the young adults plus Corgi to turn and look at him. Yeah, but your niece is a cheater, Naruto blankly accused. RWBY instantly came to her own defense. I am not, she exclaimed. You blinded me with cookie crumbs in the middle of a round. RWBY's cheeks gained a slight red tint to them. It was an accident. I got excited and shouted when I was still chewing. We could have paused it then. You still kept beating the crap out of me. That goes against ninja code. Do you want to bring dishonor to your virtual ninja clan? Alright, settle down, children, Qrow half-heartedly admonished while he walked up next to the couch. Focusing his gaze more at Naruto, he said, well, since I'm technically going to be teaching you, you might have to come to patch pretty often. Setting down his scroll, Naruto replied with, and why is that? Can't we just go to the forests like I've been doing? Kid, you're not supposed to be doing that anyway, especially not near the academy. If anyone outside the little circle of people that have been watching you finds out, it could make Beacon look bad, and politics and public relations can be a pain. Not saying we're not going to do that again at some point, but it has to be executed better. Secondly, we have a lot more freedom out here, not to mention Signal is closer and I'd rather not take a trip every time I need to work with you. So you're going to make me travel instead? Because you're lazy? Naruto replied with a little disdain. Qrow held up a finger. As a matter of fact, no. You got a good workout getting here, right? Yeah, I guess. Well, there you go. That'll be your stamina and control training. When you're actually here, it'll mostly be about the combat itself. Qrow's face gave an expression of some quick thinking. And change of plans. I think it would be best if you stayed the night. And why do you think that? Naruto replied. Just feel we need to make the most of the time we have, and I'd rather we get started today and then continue bright and early tomorrow. Resting and leaning on her arms on top of the couch's backrest, RWBY spoke. What are you planning to do? I want to get a feel of Blondie's skills personally. Naruto raised a brow. So what? We going to fight? Pretty much, Qrow retorted while beckoning the teen to follow him outside. Grab your weapon. RWBY, I'm guessing you want to watch, so get dressed. But Junk and Jammy's day, she weakly whined back, ignoring Naruto's curious stare. Qrow stopped walking and looked at her. You can get back to it later and Yang will probably be here to join. Besides, I'm gonna need you for something. RWBY sighed. Fine. She then got off the couch and walked up the stairs to get to her room. Come on, we're already wasting time, Qrow said and continued his walk to the door. Naruto got a grip of his blade and followed the man's trail. Junk and Jammy's day? Yang? The blonde asked once they left the house. Just something RWBY made up when she was little to give her some excuse to have fun and overdose on sugar every Saturday if nothing else is going on. Yang is her older sister by 2 years and is your age. I think you two will get along when she and their father get here. And who's the father? Taiyang Xiaolong, a huntsman and teacher at Signal like me. Does he know about this? Yeah, and he was going to tell RWBY if she hadn't split off from them so quickly to come back here. I'm sure Yang has been told by now, though. Okay, ready. Wait for us. RWBY shouted from behind them as she jogged up with Zwei following in tow. When he glanced over, Naruto saw that the girl's new outfit fit the same color scheme of mostly black and red. On her feet were black calf-high boots that blended in with the dark leggings that were visible to just above her knees. Her thighs and waist were covered by a black skirt with red trimming along with a belt that seemed to hold cartridges and had a silver rose emblem attached near her right hip. Around her midsection was a black cincher with red lacing that matched the long-sleeved black blouse she wore, along with a compacted crescent rose hanging on her lower back. Lastly, the most eye-catching part of her attire was the wavy red hood that hugged her shoulders and back that was attached to her shirt by use of 2 cross-shaped pins. Sweet hood, Naruto commented with a small thumbs up. Once RWBY caught up and matched their pace, she gave a cheesy smile and a thumbs up of her own. Sweet hoodie. If you're both done ogling each other, we can get down to business, Qrow said while they stopped in a sizable clearing on the property. I can't wait to hit you, Naruto muttered as he stared at Qrow with annoyance while missing RWBY's embarrassed expression. That didn't mean she didn't sneak in some irritation at her uncle's minor teasing. She may be used to it from him and Yang, but being around someone she just met wasn't making anything better. Well, since we're here, I want to talk about one more thing before we get started. And this is partly where you come in, RWBY. She sounded. Qrow looked at Naruto. Alright, if I'm remembering this correctly from last night, when you were talking to your sword you mentioned something about getting to a forge. That means you want to give your weapon some more oomph, right? After hearing that Naruto talked to his blade, RWBY unnoticeably whispered, I'm not the only one. Yeah? Naruto replied. Well, since we're a little short on preparation time and today has been pretty charitable already, why don't we go ahead and arrange for you to use Signal's Forge to get you a new toy? Qrow offered with a shrug. Naruto blinked. I am honestly starting to think whatever I'm getting involved with is either really illegal, or just the start of something that's gonna royally suck at some point in the future, he said vacantly. Because trespassing onto academy grounds full of monsters and surrounded by the kingdom's trained warriors is perfectly legal, Qrow calmly retorted. The blonde shrugged. Touché, old man. While Qrow developed a slight frown, RWBY asked, Naruto, why were you doing that for as long as you have? Because I'm stupid, Naruto replied without an ounce of shame. Oh, okay. Naruto turned back to Qrow. Still, all these offers are really sounding too good to be true. I'm kinda half expecting RWBY to attack from behind in some sort of master plan to capture or kill me. RWBY blinked innocently while Qrow said, well, don't bother me too much about it. You'll have someone else to annoy when all is said and done. Now I'm positive we can get started on improving your blade tomorrow, but let's get back to involving little RWBY here. I suggest you let her help you in the whole forging process. Naruto curiously looked at the short girl next to him. Weren't you about to say something about helping earlier? Looking somewhat abashed, RWBY replied with, well, yeah. If you want we can go over ideas and stuff I don't know. I'm guessing she already showed you her scythe? Qrow asked and got a nod from Naruto. Of course she did. Well, the reason why I'm recommending her help is because she designed and made every little bit of her weapon. She only needed help with some manufacturing and training to properly use it. Trust me, she's a natural and can find a good fit for you. Glancing back to RWBY, Naruto saw that she was shyly taking her uncle's praise in stride. If she can, then I don't see why not. I didn't exactly have much of a plan besides spending what I've saved up on whatever I could find that felt right, the blonde said after a moment of thought. RWBY perked up at his words. This is going to be great, she exclaimed with fresh enthusiasm. We're going to make you the absolute best instrument of death Remnant has ever seen. She paused. Well, maybe second to Crescent Rose and maybe a few others, but that really depends on the ones wielding them still. I won't let you down. She finished with a salute. Feeling her smile a little infectious, Naruto showed a small one of his own and lifted a closed fist. Looking forward to working with you then. Catching on with the gesture, RWBY raised her own smaller fist and bumped Naruto's. Since we got that out of the way, let's finally get this thing officially started, Qrow said. Naruto started turning his head to face the huntsman as he said, so what are we? Unfortunately for the blonde, his sentence couldn't go on due to being rudely interrupted by Qrow's fist slamming into his whiskered cheek along with the side of his nose. Naruto quickly staggered into the direction the punch was thrown while holding a hand tightly over the now throbbing area. Thankfully only feeling pain and not blood leaking thanks to his aura, Naruto turned a very hostile gaze towards the older male. What the fuck? The other member of this family apparently felt she needed to interrupt him mid-sentence as well. Rushing to a spot in front of him, RWBY poked Naruto in the chest and managed to somehow look concerned and strict at the same time. Fudge, she simply stated. Naruto looked at her incredulously. Are you serious right now? Fudge, she repeated with another stern whisper like before. The male teen continued to stare at her with exasperation before he took a couple of deep breaths and slowly gazed at Qrow, who was calmly waiting for a response. Okay, Naruto quietly started with RWBY proudly patting his shoulder a couple of times and checking to see if her uncle did any lasting damage. What the fudge was that for? A fudging warning would have been nice, you motherfudger. For fudge's sake, who the fudge starts off with that? Fudge. After being surprised at his sudden outburst, RWBY did nothing but stare with shocked eyes as she slowly raised her hand to cover her mouth at the veiled vulgarity. Not showing any major reaction, Qrow responded with, just wanted to try some hand-to-hand first. It's important to not completely rely on your weapon or semblance. You never know when your base skills will have to come in and save your life. That's something for you to remember too, RWBY. Being called old multiple times by Naruto might have also inspired the little surprise, but he wasn't going to voice it. The hit was plenty satisfying enough, and he was able to already dish out a quick life lesson, though RWBY was still frozen where she stood, so he wasn't sure his words traveled to her brain yet. While this was going on, two new arrivals stood at the edge of the clearing and got there just in time to witness the attack and hear the subsequent vengeful words that were shouted. They had just dropped off the groceries they bought at their cabin house and easily tracked down the trio to the usual area where their spars occurred. Dad, why did Qrow punch that guy? A feminine voice asked perplexingly. A man sighed and rubbed his brow. Qrow is just being Qrow. We can ask when all is said and done, young. For now we'll just have to watch. It seems that the official teaching has begun. So that's Naruto, huh? Yang muttered as she saw him readily square up to fight her uncle with a whiskered glare. Looks like this is going to be fun. Why is RWBY just standing there? The man asked as he watched his daughter barely move a muscle. Yang focused on her little sister before shrugging. Guess her whole censorship system was violated from what we heard. A foolish smirk grew on her face. If she wants to get out of the way, her brain better put the pedal to the metal. With a side glance, Yang saw her father softly palm his face with an almost inaudible groan. You know, cause of her rose petals. Get it? She continued with the same satisfied vigor. Okay, that wasn't my best one. Omake, alternative first meeting, review inspired. Zwei tilted his head and whined a little at the blonde. Wedding in the credits tugged at your heartstrings too? Well, then you should see. Before Naruto could continue, the front door behind him shot open viciously. Obviously he was about to face whatever disturbance made itself known, but he had no such chance. Faster than he was expecting, the hair on the back of his head was snared in two tight grips and pulled back, causing his neck to bend over the backrest, and force him to stare wide-eyed at the ceiling. Straight after came the feeling of something pressing against his head, and the sound of someone deeply inhaling. This caused a multitude of disturbing shivers to shoot throughout his entire being as he remained frozen from the shock. Immediately following the inhale was the intoxicated whisper that said, "Strawberries," he screamed. Chapter 3, Ramen or Bust. What was previously a peaceful clearing among Patch's wilderness was now a temporary battleground for two combatants, as various thuds and grunts sounded out for all to hear. Among other things, "You got the power, kid, but your technique isn't all that great," Qrow commented as he blocked yet another punch from the rapidly moving Naruto. The whiskered blonde let out another quick breath of air through his clenched teeth, as he shot his fist forward to only meet air. After missing the evasive huntsman, Naruto frustratingly replied with, "Well, what the hell did you expect?" He quickly punched with his left only to reveal it as a feint before he tried to kick the man's side with his right leg. Sadly, the move couldn't quite strike home as Qrow caught the appendage and parried the teen away. After switching positions due to the man's counter, Naruto sloppily found his footing and continued a bit more calmly than he was mid-punch. Was I supposed to be some master brawler just for messing with Grim? If you hadn't noticed, they're easier to punch in the face when they've been sliced up beforehand and because they're so predictable after a while. Qrow calmly stood in place but was prepared to handle whatever the younger male decided to throw at him. They're only predictable because you've fought the same species of Grim a bunch of times over the years. Trust me, if you get far enough you're going to face monsters that make beating up Borbatusks and Beowulfs seem like a walk through a meadow of flowers. That's why you gotta at least be adequate enough to survive. Deciding to go on the offensive for a bit, Qrow went forward and struck his own punch. Thankfully for Naruto's sake, the blonde managed to swerve out of the way and even successfully blocked another. After going through his small combo, Qrow backed off a few steps and said, "At least your defense seems pretty decent." Still having his fists raised to protect himself, Naruto replied, "Well, you tend to pick up how to not get the crap knocked out of you when you know damaging your clothes will only majorly piss off the person stuck with fixing them." Qrow cracked a small smirk. "Dad? Sister?" he asked. "Pretty much my big sister," Naruto replied with a small smile until his face took on a minor look of trepidation. "It was a lot scarier when I couldn't fight, and she was still bigger than me, still scary now depending on how bad it is." "Yeah, been there, kid," Qrow responded after thinking back to a distant memory or two. "Well, let's see how good you are at not becoming a smear on the ground." After his words, Qrow launched forward with more aggression that had Naruto's adrenaline running instantly. While the spar went on, RWBY finally got her presence of mind together, and walked to join her father and sister at a comfortable viewing distance. They both looked the same as before, not that that was very surprising considering she had last seen them only a few hours ago. Her older sister, Yang, decided to sport a ponytail today to control her usually long flowing blonde hair. Even with the yellow locks securely held in place by an elastic band, it gave off an impression that they could be unleashed at a moment's notice. Bright lilac eyes noticed her appearance at their side, causing her to give a little wave and smile to accent her similarly pale complexion until they interestingly went back to the fight between their uncle and Naruto. Covering her torso was an orange tank top that covered her admittedly mature form and exposed her midriff, while over that was an open gray long-sleeved jacket that bore a symbol resembling two parallel halves of a yellow heart on the left sleeve. Adorning her bottom half was gray-brown cargo pants that were barely low enough to expose the edge of her dark undergarments. Stitched onto the pants was a burning yellow heart similar to the other on the jacket above her right knee, and a patch in the shape of a shield with 3 Ursa masks inside. The last notable piece of her attire was simple white sneakers that gave her comfortable mobility. Watching the spar with a more calculative eye was her father, Taiyang Xiaolong. As per usual, he had on his black shoes, brown cargo pants and belt, a brown vest over his tan short-sleeved dress shirt that lacked the right sleeve, a red bandana wrapped around his left arm, and a brown fingerless glove, vambrace and metal spalder on his right arm. More captivatingly was the tattoo on his exposed right bicep that was the same emblem on the sleeve of Yang's jacket, hinting that the jacket used to belong to him. A stubble covered his jawline along with a small soul patch below his bottom lip that was slowly turning into a grin as the fight went on. A breeze slightly ruffled his short and shaggy pale blonde hair, bringing some attention to the intrigued blue eyes he bore. "Up to speed, RWBY?" Taiyang asked as his youngest daughter took a position between him and Yang. RWBY sheepishly smiled. "Yeah, I am now." Her face then showed a little bit of an annoyed pout. "A bit more effort to warn me would have been appreciated. I wasn't exactly ready for the surprise." Yang rolled her eyes. "We did put more effort. Check your scroll." RWBY blinked in response before she pulled out her device. After tapping the screen, she read aloud the notification that she somehow managed to miss throughout her trip back home and her little gaming session with Naruto. "Hey RWBY, don't freak out when you get home." Qrow invited someone named Naruto. "Oh, okay, oops." She guiltily chuckled and rubbed the back of her head. Her father smiled. "So how did the surprise go?" He felt he already knew the answer. RWBY sounded, practically giving away how their initial first encounter went. Well, not the greatest at first, at least for me. She perked up a tad, however. He does seem nice though. RWBY made a new friend. Yan was quick to approach and wrap her little sister into an overly affectionate hug that lifted her short stature up from the ground. I'm so proud of you, WBY. She finished with a mocking baby voice. Arms forcibly held at her sides, RWBY could do nothing but try to kick the blonde away. Sadly, it seemed to be failing after a few tries. Yan, quit it, I can't help it. Seeing you make new possible buddies is always fun to watch. The excited blonde finally set RWBY down after a few more shakes. So, what did you guys do? She eagerly asked, now ignoring the spar for the time being. Her sister's seemingly increasing social life was obviously much more important. After straightening out her blouse and skirt, RWBY pointedly stared at her sister. Nothing. We just played some video games before coming out here when you showed up. Her face switched moods as she remembered something else. Oh. And Uncle Qrow suggested that I help upgrade Naruto's sword and he said yes. Crescent Rose is getting a sister, Yang gasped overdramatically. You're making a weapon together? RWBY nodded excitedly, happy at the prospect of bringing another beautiful utensil of death into the world. The blonde female whistled in an impressed manner. Wow, that was quick. Might as well have him move in while you're at it. Huh? RWBY curiously replied. Taeyong was silent, yet he did keep a smile of amusement showing as his children went back and forth. Yang's spirited personality clashing with RWBY's more innocent one was always a good show. Ha! Finally got you, Databao! Naruto yelled triumphantly, making both sisters join back with their father and observing the bout. It didn't seem as if much had happened, considering this was more of a test fight than anything. They did, however, notice that the whiskered male's clothes were a bit more disheveled and even dirty from the grass and dirt. There was even a silver locket now loosely wobbling outside of Naruto's shirt that was tucked in before and out of sight. The blonde had a satisfied look upon his face while Qrow only looked a little annoyed as he rubbed his right shoulder. Yeah, congratulations, Qrow said with a hint of a sarcastic tone. You got a lucky one in after being hit 10 times as much. You should be proud. The man settled into a relaxed pose as he let his aura prevent a bruise from forming after the hit. Even if the team was only able to get a single successful shot, it was pretty damn hard. It doesn't matter as long as it works, Naruto cheekily replied. I just gotta wear you down, and I'm not even tired. I can keep on going all day. Qrow rolled his eyes. I really hope you're not stupid enough to think that's a complete win. In real life I doubt you'll be successful by lasting against an opponent, and taking a beating for a long time while people, both civilian and huntsman alike, are dying around you. Obviously you can afford a longer fight in some cases, but a majority has to be as swift and clean as possible. Naruto sighed. Noted. Still, that's not the case right now. Naruto got back in his usual fighting stance with fists raised. Are we still doing this or what? The older man in his neutral posture thought to himself for a bit until he said, yeah, might as well. Weapons free this time. Not needing to be told twice, Naruto quickly unsheathed his blade and shot forward. In a reverse roll from the prior night, Qrow was the one to immediately raise his retracted weapon for the block. It was easily successful and he didn't buckle at all once the loud clang rang out. There was notably a good amount of power from the overhead strike, but it wasn't anything he wasn't already used to. Instead of going for another slash like Qrow expected of the teenager, Naruto followed his attack by raising a foot towards the man's torso. There wasn't a lot of force behind the movement, so the black-haired male guessed he was simply going to use his body as a way to quickly propel himself backward and follow through with some sort of combo. Might as well humor him and let him try whatever he wanted. He couldn't completely obliterate the huntsman in training right off the bat after all. However, instead of Naruto simply pushing off of Qrow's body, the older man was barely able to see the young man's foot suddenly become encased in an orange glow. The instant he saw the aura-covered appendage make contact with his stomach, he suddenly found himself flying backward while an explosion of energy made his ears ring. The seasoned huntsman first made contact on the ground with his back a pretty sizable distance away from his original spot before he continued on a little further, looking a bit like a stone skipping along the surface of water. Getting over his initial surprise, Qrow righted himself and stopped his momentum by stabbing his weapon into the ground, creating a sizable gash into the soil. Halting almost immediately, the man deeply sighed to himself as he slowly stood back up from his kneeling position and sent an annoyed glare at the blonde. You just couldn't wait to use that, could you? He asked as he began patting some dirt off of his sleeve. He honestly expected some small swordplay first before the team decided to showcase some of his abilities. Naruto, on the other hand, had the most shit-eating grin plastered on his face. Relaxing his pose and crossing his arms smugly, he spoke with no small amount of pride. Do you know how long I've wanted to do that to something besides a stupid Beowulf? There was no way in hell I was gonna wait till later to use that on you, especially after that damn cheap shot. That was awesome. Is that your semblance, Naruto? RWBY enthusiastically shouted from the sidelines. Naruto, with a cocky grin still showing, turned to glance at the young woman. He first took notice of the new arrivals watching on, seeing that the man took a moment to nod as a greeting while the blonde girl uncrossed her arms to give a short yet cheerful wave. After responding in kind with a nod and wave of his own, he responded. Part of it. This is just something I've been practicing a lot with lately. I could have put in more juice to launch him further, but I wanted to see his reaction. His face was enough to satisfy me for today, maybe the whole week. You're slipping, Qrow! Yang teasingly shouted with her hands cupped around her mouth. Maybe this is a sign that you should retire soon. Naruto smiled at Yang's words and turned to the waiting Branwen. She's got a point, old man. It might be time to start looking into an old folks' home. Before Naruto could finish, he, like Qrow before, found himself hurtling backward at a fast rate, whereas Qrow was forced back by Naruto's explosive ability. The blonde himself only had a moment to register a distortion in the air racing towards him before the inevitable collision. He had a noticeably longer hang time flying through the air than the older male and clumsily rolled along the dirt before roughly slamming back first into a tree. After sliding down into a sitting position, the blonde leaned his head back against the damaged bark and groaned. I'm not old, Qrow muttered calmly to himself after seeing the obvious success of the sonic wave he sent from an almost imperceptible slash of his blade. Naruto! RWBY shouted before using her semblance to speedily appear at his side across the field, leaving a trail of petals all the while. With only a raised brow after seeing the attack, Taeyang said, wasn't this supposed to be a test fight, Qrow? Yeah, you didn't even try doing that to me or RWBY until months into when we first started training. Yang chimed in as she saw her sister repeatedly poke Naruto's whiskered cheek. Not concerned in the slightest, Qrow propped his elbow on his weapon's handle and relaxed. Trust me, he's way more durable than this. He's only stunned a bit because he wasn't expecting it. Next time he'll probably get right back up and keep going until he can't move. He's annoying like that. He noticed that RWBY took her own initiative and unwrapped a single packaged cookie from her pocket and started waving it in front of the blonde's face. Intrigued, Yang asked, and how do you know that? She hadn't exactly been told why Qrow was bringing Naruto over to be taught, just that he was. Qrow and some others have been secretly watching him fight Grim for a while, the elder Xiaolong answered. Haven't really seen anything myself, but apparently Naruto's more of a stubborn and sporadic fighter that can take a beating and keep going. Yang smirked smugly. Those types are always fun. That sounded pretty similar to herself, especially with the involvement of her semblance. Which is what we need to fix, Qrow cut in. If he can fight more effectively and take fewer hits, he can be a monster given time. You were the same way, Yang, but you've obviously added a lot more consistency into your style since the start. After smelling the sugary treat in front of him, Naruto was able to gather his bearings as he whispered. I'm already getting tired of this guy. The blonde sniffed again and opened his squinted eyes. Peanut butter? He curiously uttered. Yep, RWBY replied as she dropped the cookie into his only free hand. You earned that one. Sitting up straighter, Naruto asked. Do you always carry these with you? RWBY honestly looked a bit perplexed. You don't? Naruto was about to comment on the apparent weird behavior, but he reined himself when he remembered that he used to always carry instant ramen cups in his backpack. He still kinda did sometimes when sneaking off to train, if he was being honest. Deciding to ignore her curiosity, he stood back up with a bit more pep in his step before popping his neck and back in preparation. After taking an overly aggressive bite out of the gifted cookie, Naruto yelled, Okay, now I have to get you back again, Dadabayo. Qrow tilted his head in thought for a moment as he continued to lean on his sword. Nah, I think we're good for now, he answered plainly. What? Naruto exclaimed in anger. You can't seriously end it like that. Well, I just did. Now come on. We're heading back and we'll go over some stuff after dinner. Heavily sighing in resignation, Naruto sheathed his sword and started making his way to the rest of the gathering group with RWBY by his side. Whatever, but that dinner better be the ramen you made me bring. Qrow curiously gazed at the young male behind as they walked. I'm sure you have it all the time considering where you live, so why not skip it this once? Because, Naruto started sternly, those bowls were a pain for my family to make so unexpectedly, and I had to run non-stop for an hour to get them here. Also, anyone who wastes ramen isn't exactly someone I want to be around. Blinking at how serious Naruto suddenly got, Qrow responded. It's just noodles, kid. Naruto narrowed his eyes. You're the one that paid so damn much for it. Qrow shrugged carelessly. That's nothing for a huntsman of my experience. Seeing that the older man wasn't biting, Naruto glanced at the young scythe wielder beside him and thought of something. If you let those bowls go to waste, then RWBY isn't working on my weapon, he said simply. He wasn't being totally serious, but he didn't really expect RWBY to react that much. He was wrong. The young woman gasped in horror and stared at his whiskered face with a wide-eyed visage of betrayal. Naruto flinched, not expecting the sharp tug on his morality from the sight. Thankfully, RWBY didn't linger on him for too long as she changed targets, specifically her uncle, whose hands were currently holding most of the cards in this decision. Instantly she stared at Qrow with glimmering eyes that practically screamed her heartfelt desires. Her gaze, quivered lip, and high-pitched whines slowly emanating from her closed mouth stopped the man and everyone else in their tracks. Weirdly enough, Qrow's face didn't show any sign of budging and continued to stare at his niece dead in the eyes without remorse. This went on for far too long in everyone's minds until Qrow eventually looked at the blonde father. What were you guys planning to make? He asked evenly. Stew, he replied after a moment. It's ramen now, Qrow said before turning and once again leading everyone back to the home. Okay? Taeyang sounded as he walked with the others, RWBY victoriously smiling next to her sister, and Naruto. However, Ruby's face quickly switched to disdain before poking Naruto to get his attention. Her face, while still holding a dominant sense of her natural innocence, still made Naruto pause. Don't do that again, she ordered seriously. Naruto's eyes widened a tad from the intimidation and lingered a bit as Ruby went back to her usual self. Noticing the male's reaction, Yan with a smirk said, yeah, don't get between Ruby and her love of weapons. You'll only get hurt. Ruby nodded to herself. Noted, Naruto replied before his face snapped to attention. Oh yeah, Naruto, by the way. He held a hand over Ruby's head. Yan, she introduced pleasantly as she shook his hand above her sister. And I'm Taeyang, these girls' father. Nice to have you here, Taeyang greeted politely and held his hand out to Naruto behind him as they kept walking. Thanks, Naruto responded as he shook the man's hand in kind. Ruby perked up. Oh yeah, Naruto? Yeah? He responded. With her head tilted, the black-haired girl asked, what's a databao? Naruto looked a little sheepish at his lifelong verbal tic being brought up. Well, we'll tell you when you're older, Yang cut in. You're not that much older than me at all. Still older, Yang retorted, simply happy to mess with her sister even though she had no idea what the strange word was either. The group only made small talk for a bit until they reached the house. After getting briefly situated, Naruto sat down on the living room couch and decided to call home to let Tsuchi and Ayam know of his apparent overnight stay. Hey, Ayam, Naruto greeted as he saw the brunette's face pop up onto his new scroll's screen. From the looks of her background, she was using their computer upstairs to receive the call. Naruto? Her voice rang from the speaker. Since when did your scroll have video calling? You've never done that before. Yeah, long story short, I got the newest scroll as a gift from Qrow over here. I'll explain everything when I get back home tomorrow. I'm just letting you know that I'm going to spend the night, so don't worry. Alright, but is this going to be a regular thing? She replied. Naruto shrugged. Don't know. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be visiting here a little often, but that's about it. Okay, I'll let Dad know. Don't do anything stupid while you're Who's that? Ayam abruptly asked. Naruto was confused for a moment until he felt someone leaning over the couch from behind. Poking her head into the shot and over his shoulder, Yan shot a cheerful smile at the female Ichiraku. Hello, she exclaimed in a sing-song voice. Ayam blinked. Hi, she replied confusedly. Patting Naruto on the head, Yan said, don't worry about Whiskers here. The eccentric young woman then reached out beyond the frame of the camera and pulled a surprised Ruby into a tight side hug. My sister and I won't let him get into any trouble. Thank you? The brunette responded as she gazed at the two new faces on the screen. I'm sorry, but who are you? Yang Xiaolong and my sister Ruby Rose, Whisker's new best friend apparently, Yang said with a shrug at the end. Yang! Ruby whined uncomfortably as her face was squished into her sister's shoulder. Best friend was obviously jumping the gun in her mind. She had only met the blonde earlier in the day and, while so far he seemed like an enjoyable enough person to be around, she didn't want any potential friendship with him to be weirdly tainted by Yang, making it seem like she was desperate for companionship. What? Yang replied. I'm only being friendly. That's how you make buddies, Rubes. Take notes. Taking a second to shrug off the random introduction, the brunette replied with, anyway, I'm Ayam Ichiraku. Nice to meet you, she said kindly and glanced at Naruto's single eye on the screen, the male's grip on the scroll having been disturbed by the sister's sudden closeness. I guess I'll let you go then. Oh, and check the other pocket in the backpack that didn't hold the ramen. See you tomorrow. Bye. And with a simple push of a button, the woman's face disappeared from Naruto's screen. Replaying her words into his head, Naruto reached nearby and grabbed the backpack he'd lugged over to the island. Upon zipping open the front and sizable pocket, Naruto discovered some tightly packed pajamas, extra clothing and other small essentials needed for sleeping over. The little bit of extra weight must have not been noticed since he was such a hurry. Naruto stared at the objects in a small amount of awe. Her foresight honestly scares me sometimes. With crossed arms, Yang proudly said, yeah, big sisters are just awesome like that. The hooded girl her gave a blank stare. She muttered. What was that? Yang questioned with some natural sibling annoyance building up. Naruto, what's that thing? Ruby asked as she pointed to the pile of unveiled items, completely ignoring her sister. The item she was referring to was some bundled piece of dark cloth barely peeking from the bottom of the pile. Not recognizing the item at first, Naruto grabbed and held it up, instantly identifying it as he did so. Why did she pack this old thing? He said as he saw the now revealed soft hat with stitched and narrowed eyes and goofy teeth hanging over the hem. Is that some sort of kitty sleeping cap? Yang gushed as she immediately grabbed it from Naruto's grip, not hesitating to look it over closely. With a teasing smile she said, does it protect you from sky monsters and bad dreams? Like before, she was having fun with the baby voice. Naruto wasn't amused at all and glanced at the girl with an emotionless gaze. Yes it did, when I was a kid. I made it for me years ago, but I haven't worn it in a long time. She probably packed it as a joke or something. Sir, as far as we know, Yang continued to tease. Wordlessly she gained a thoughtful expression before she firmly fastened the cap on Ruby's head, not meeting any resistance at all as they continued on as if the piece of apparel wasn't there. At that moment Taeyang walked into the doorway from the kitchen. Since we only need to heat the ramen back up, dinner will be ready real soon. Yang, grab the bread when you guys head over here, he requested as he disappeared back into the room. The older sister walked to the coffee table and grabbed a plastic bag filled with dinner rolls that they picked up from a bakery. With utmost seriousness, Yang stared right at Naruto and held the bag up. Are you ready to roll? She couldn't stop the victorious smirk that grew at the corner of her mouth. RWBY pulled the cap down over her eyes as she pressed her face into the couch cushion, sounding out a muffled groan that was easily heard by the other two. The two brightly haired teens stared each other down, the female eagerly awaiting a response to her moment of genius. After an agonizing wait, Naruto turned to the still immobile RWBY and gently poked her. HM? She let out. Do you think your roof is high enough for me to end it all if I dove head first? Naruto calmly asked, not paying attention to the offended scoff he received from Yang. A second went by before RWBY gave a weak thumbs up, face still planted into the backrest. Alright then, the blonde responded as he started making his way to the front door. Right when he was about to grab the handle, Taeyang's voice called out, "We're all ready! Come and get it!" Withdrawing his hand, Naruto sighed and turned around to walk towards the kitchen with the girls. Damn it, he silently cursed. Dinner had been a simple affair. While Naruto would have liked the ramen to be much fresher for the noodles and broth to receive its full appreciation, everyone still enjoyed it plentifully enough as they conversed. The only somewhat important things to note were a few basic plans of how Qrow was going to work with Naruto from the next day onward. They would spar for the most part, hoping to build and fine-tune Naruto's overall fighting style. Hand-to-hand would take slight precedence as a start due to the blonde not possessing, let alone having started designing, his future partner in crime alongside RWBY. The older huntsman's job was also made easier because the young man did pretty well for himself by building up some solid strength and an obviously above-average stamina over the years. There was also some questions about Naruto's aura and semblance from the two females, but they went unanswered as Naruto decided to teasingly tell them to wait and see. The rest of the night went on by without much fanfare, but since it happened to be RWBY's apparent day of sugar and fun, she forced the other teens to sit down and marathon a few movies with her. Admittedly, it had been fun until they decided to finally turn in the night some hours later, the sisters going to their shared space while Naruto was given the upstairs guest bedroom with grey decor. That's where the blonde found himself currently, though he wasn't aware of it in the moment, since he was blissfully unconscious as he rested. That is, until something gently clamped over his mouth, easily making his eyes shoot open as he let out a mostly muted grunt of surprise. He would have sat up as his senses shot into gear, but some gentle resistance kept him at bay. Blinking the blurriness out his vision, he focused on the small hand over his mouth, and followed the rest of the appendage it was attached to until he met the silver eyes of RWBY. She was once again in the pajamas she had on when they were first introduced, with the addition of his sleeping cap still atop her head. It was a little strange, yes, but he didn't really care enough to question it. Sorry, she whispered as she knelt at his bedside. Naruto relaxed, causing RWBY to withdraw her hand. What are you doing here? He whispered back. RWBY looked a little embarrassed at the question. I couldn't sleep. Every time I tried, all I could see were a bunch of weapon ideas shooting through my mind. Naruto yawned. Is that a normal thing? He asked as he rubbed the corner of his eye. A little, she admitted, but this is about something that will actually become real. The last time I kept myself up like this was when I was still thinking about plans for Crescent Rose. Fair enough, Naruto drowsily replied. Now then, RWBY started as she elongated her scroll horizontally as the screen became a beacon in the mostly dark room. I looked up some basic designs for swords like yours. You can pick a few that you like and we can go from there. With rapid taps on the screen, rows upon rows of pictures appeared for the duo to go over. Naruto lazily glanced at the many kinds of blades that were held to his face as he continued to lay down flat on his back, not putting in the effort to sit up yet. The scroll's low brightness made him squint, accenting his whisker marks as he said, Do we really need to do this now? I know you're excited and all, but Qrow said we would worry about this tomorrow. It is tomorrow, RWBY said as she poked the small clock on the corner of the screen that revealed it was almost 2 in the morning, her eyes innocently poking over the device from Naruto's viewpoint. Naruto cracked a tiny grin at the response. He would have said something back had it not been for the figure creeping in slowly behind RWBY's shoulder. RWBY noticed his shifted gaze and quickly followed suit. As soon as she saw the slight glow from 2 mischievous red eyes, she already felt a scream escaping her. Just like she did to Naruto before, a hand covered her open maw, muffling the high-pitched shriek as she looked at the newcomer. After making her dramatic and sneaky appearance, Yang leaned into the light of RWBY's scroll with a large and cheeky smile plastered on her face, letting her eyes return back to their normal color by cutting the flow of aura. With her hair now its naturally messy self, along with a different orange tank top and small black shorts acting as pajamas, she teasingly said, And what exactly is going on here, you two? Nothing, RWBY answered in annoyance from the scare. It doesn't look like nothing. Yang looked between them before settling on her sister. Not even a full day through and you're already sneaking into his room in the middle of the night? Yang sniffed dramatically and gently embraced RWBY. Stop growing up so fast. RWBY didn't put up much resistance to the hug. Even though she was a little annoyed from the teasing, she really didn't want to start a stupid argument that would wake up their father down the hall. They at least didn't have to worry about Qrow, but that was only because he took off towards the city after dinner, and saying he'd be back in the morning. Although, now that she thought about it, Maybe alerting their father to them both sneaking into Naruto's room at this hour wasn't exactly the better option out of the two. Not receiving the immediate response she wanted from RWBY, Yang broke the hold and went into a more casual mood. Seriously though, what's going on? She asked. Naruto yawned again as he tried to become more comfortable. RWBY couldn't sleep, so she wanted to burn some energy off by showing some weapon plans. But you pretty much showed up right after she started. Ah, Yang sounded a little boring, but expected. She shrugged as she sat cross-legged. Well, sorry that I wasn't trying to suffocate him something, RWBY responded with an eye roll. You didn't have to follow me either. Not like I had much of a choice. Your tossing and turning pretty much kept me from completely turning in. Mumbling to yourself about some bargain to your brain to let you sleep didn't exactly help. You've slept through worse. Besides, this is actually important. Anything we go over can drastically change how Naruto goes through his life. Right, and AR Naruto? RWBY questioned as she saw the once again sleeping face of the boy, his chest peacefully going up and down in a steady rhythm. Welp, looks like you bored him to sleep, Yang chimed in with her chin lazily resting on her hand. It was going fine until you showed up, RWBY retorted. Yang looked ready to go back her bed until she saw the moonlight softly reflect off of something near Naruto's head. A quick glance revealed the familiar silver locket lazily resting on his pillow as it was still wrapped around his neck. The shiny necklace never came up in conversation, but she now found herself even more curious now that there wasn't much else to focus on. Without preamble, she found herself slowly reaching for it. Yang, what are you doing? RWBY chastised. Just want to see if there's any engraving or something, she replied simply. However, right when she was about to make contact, Yang found her wrist grabbed in a strong grip. Both surprised sisters saw that Naruto somehow had his arm snap out in a blink from under his blanket while still asleep. After grabbing the woman's wrist, Naruto's eyes slowly blinked back open. Taking a drowsy glance at the hand still near his face, Naruto tiredly asked, You guys still here? Yeah? Yang responded, her arms still held captive. How long has it been since I fell back asleep? About 10 seconds, RWBY answered. Another yawn escaped the male again. Oh, good times. A little more awareness returned to his brain as he sat up before barely noticing he had the older sister in his grip. What were you trying to do? He asked. Checking for a pulse? The blonde replied in an obvious lie. Naruto slowly looked at RWBY. Was it the necklace? Yep. There was no shame in ratting out her sister in something so simple. Yang once again had his attention. You couldn't wait until the world was awake like RWBY too, and Im always told me I was an impatient one, he ended with a mutter more to himself. Her hand now released, Yang said, sorry? Saw something shiny and you kinda just want to have at it. You understand that, right, Whiskers? She joked with an abashed grin. Did you hint at me being like a cat or something? He got a nonchalant shrug in response. I'm used to it, though try to keep everything related to foxes if you want to joke around like that again. I'm not sure if they chase shiny things though. What, is that your preference even if you're not a faunus? Yang asked curiously with a raised brow and smile. I guess. Look. Naruto then squinted and puffed out his cheeks a little to highlight the whisker marks, making the similarities to the canine in question become more apparent. The females got a good kick out of the action and let out their own set of quiet giggles. Yeah, that got me plenty of cheek pinching as a kid. The number of times his face was abused by the loving embrace of older women, including Im and her friends for a good amount of time, was practically endless and left the afflicted areas red and sore. Obviously, that didn't include the more negative side of the attention he experienced from a certain type of people once they made their assumptions of his species from the marks alone. Anyway, you wanted to look at this? He asked, holding the main silver ornament up in a gentle grasp. Yang hesitated for a small moment. Well, not if it's too personal or something. I don't want to bother you too much, says the person who just tried to grab it while he slept, RWBY commented. Don't need your input. Yang quickly whispered back. Here. The two young women looked back to see Naruto hold the shiny trinket out to be grabbed. I don't mind you guys looking at it. There's nothing about it that I'm exactly hiding. It is special to me, though. Yang was the first to take hold of it and look it over. It was easily a thing of beauty, looking even more stunning because of the moonlight gently casting down on the metal through the window. There weren't any engravings like she first guessed, but she could easily tell it was able to open up. She looked at Naruto, silently asking for permission, and received a nod after he gave a momentary glimpse towards his possession. A soft click later and the contents of the centerpiece was open for her to view. It was a simple picture, yet it spoke volumes the instant it came into her sight. Two people, a couple was her easy guess, were softly embracing each other with their sides pressed together as they posed for the camera. Soft smiles were plastered on their faces, the female expressing more excitement, while the males held a cherished pride of sorts. Despite the small difference between their grins, there was no doubt that they were full of love. The blue eyes from the male and the violet from the female were practically radiating in it. Yang took a second to acknowledge that the woman was absolutely beautiful with her blemishless visage surrounded by a practical waterfall of crimson hair, while the male had a distinct handsomeness to him as spiky yellow locks hugged his tanner and more sharper features. After the finer details of the couple were memorized, she finally focused onto the only other important part of the picture. while wearing casual clothing that were quickly skimmed over in her mind. The blonde saw that the man's hand was gently resting on the woman's stomach that had a barely noticeable bump. After taking that last bit in, Yang felt her lips stretch a bit in their own smile at the obviously expecting parents. RWBY quietly cooed over her sister's shoulder, having quickly moved to the spot once she saw the pendant open. Yang looked back up at Naruto after staring at the image for a few moments longer. I can see why it's special, she said gently. Naruto smiled back, although his had a hint of sadness to it. Quickly connecting some dots in her head, RWBY carefully asked, "You and I aren't actually related by blood, are you?" "Nope," was Naruto's simple reply. "Doesn't make her any less of a sister, though. She's known me for most of my life, so blood doesn't matter. Same goes to old man Tucci, who's pretty much my father figure and I am's actual one." Both sisters definitely understood that blood relation didn't matter. Qrow's connection to RWBY was a prime example of that. He's her uncle and that's what he'll forever be no matter what. After Yang and RWBY looked at the picture for a few moments longer, the former handed the pendant back to Naruto. "I guess having different last names was a pretty good hint," Yang commented, remembering how I am introduced herself earlier. Naruto nodded, but suddenly perked up as he pointed at the both of them inquisitively. "Then what about same dad, different mom?" RWBY answered his silent question while leaning on Yang's shoulder. "Makes sense," Naruto replied before yawning once again. Feeling they were there long enough, Yang stood up while gesturing for RWBY to do the same. "Well, while sharing our personal lives is fun and all, we should probably save the rest for another time." The brightly haired woman stretched and sounded out her own yawn. "It's still only the first day," she continued. "Come on, little sister, save the weapon fanatics for after we wake up." Feeling out the mood, RWBY begrudgingly stood up after a small huff. "Fine," she complained as she followed Yang to the hallway. As she was holding the doorknob to close the entrance, RWBY looked back at Naruto as he was once again laying down comfortably. "Good night or morning and whatever time it is yet, just go to sleep." Before Naruto could give a response, the door was hastily closed and what he guessed was for the girl to save face. Cracking a smile and quietly chuckling to himself, Naruto placed the silver necklace onto the bedside table securely before he blissfully went back into the world of dreams. "Oh, so this is the RWBY you were talking about," Tucci pleasantly stated as he leaned on the main counter of his establishment. As usual, his signature hat was atop his head with a semi-dirty towel hanging over his shoulder from some cleaning, but ever present was his squinted eyes as they wrinkled in a welcoming fashion from his smile. "Hello, sir," RWBY cheerily yet somewhat meekly responded, giving the older man a cheesy wave as well in her first impression. "Just call me Tucci, young lady. No need for formalities around here." "Yep, just feel free to call the old man anything," Naruto commented as he stood next to the side wielder. "Do you call any guy older than you an old man?" RWBY curiously asked. Naruto leaned a little closer to the counter to pat the ramen owner on the shoulder. "Nah, for Tucci it's been out of endearment for years, but for your drunkle Qrow it's to piss him off since he seems to be a little touchy about it. Is it worth being knocked around like a lifeless doll?" An amused RWBY retorted. Naruto hummed to himself and tapped the counter a few times before he snapped his fingers and said, "Overall I say yes, mostly because in a weirdly effective way that helps me resist pain and gain fighting experience." "I really shouldn't be surprised at this point," a weary feminine voice chimed in from the back of the kitchen. A few steps were heard until Ayam appeared from behind a stove and an assortment of hanging kitchen utensils. The pretty brunette said a small thank you to a departing customer before she stood next to her father. "You really shouldn't," Naruto cheekily stated. Ayam sighed before she gave RWBY a welcoming grin. "Nice to see you again, even though the first time was a video call a week ago." RWBY smiled back. "Ditto. Naruto's told me a lot about you guys over the last few days, so it's nice to finally meet in person." Tucci chuckled good-naturedly. "Only good things, I hope." As Ayam was starting to pack some food off to the side, she asked, "Wasn't your sister supposed to come along today too, RWBY?" The black-haired girl scoffed and crossed her arms. "Yeah, but she said something came up. Apparently, she's riding around in the city somewhere on her motorcycle." "Oh, well, that's too bad. She seemed nice." Ayam finished securely wrapping up a couple of takeout boxes in a plastic bag and put it next to another on the counter that was already prepared. "I know you just got back, Naruto, but these are for a couple of the good regulars." "That's fine." Naruto turned to RWBY. "You don't mind, right? We can go over some more stuff along the way and do something after like we planned with Yang. Hopefully she'll be done with whatever it is she's doing by then." "A little ramen adventure doesn't sound so bad," she replied. "Alright, cool." Naruto reached over and grabbed the separate bags while reading the tickets sticking to them on the top. "First one's for old shopkeep, huh?" With Ayam being the one to have personally overseen the order and taken care of the food, Tucci didn't know much about it. Thus, it wasn't a surprise to anyone sans RWBY to see Tucci suddenly pause his cleaning of the countertop until he tensely continued as a frown overtook his normally friendly features. Naruto rolled his eyes and Ayam sighed with the former saying, "He's not after your secrets, old man." "You don't know that for certain," the elder Ichiraka replied while pointing his rag at the blonde. "You told me he asked you more than once about how things go on in the kitchen and even how we get the broth and ramen the way it is, which, by apparent coincidence, happened to be right before he opened up a simple wok. I still swear that he's tried getting others to cozy on up around here and learn something. More than a few were asking too many questions around the same time period." Tucci grumbled to himself as he went back to wiping off a few food stains. He's never going to get his hands on my recipes, he whispered irritably. Naruto stared at the man blankly. That was a long time ago, and he operates on the other side of the district. The young man lifted up the bag for emphasis. He only ordered onigiri and grilled chicken. No need to get so paranoid while he's technically supporting your business. Now he's after my chicken. Naruto shook his head along with I am. Yep, you're going senile. The guy probably has more important things to worry about. Oh, don't get me started on those other businesses of his, Tucci replied with a twitch of his brow. He just had to open up a noodle shop once we started picking up steam and expanded the menu, even though he was and still is running a dust shop. Now's he even gone ahead and opened up an arcade, a military and police supply store, a dry cleaners and a motorcycle dealership, and he's always there whenever I or you two pass by any of them. It makes no sense. An arcade? RWBY stated with interest. Wanna do that later? She asked Naruto. Sure. Naruto looked and saw that the older male was perhaps getting ready to continue his rant, so he quickly ushered RWBY to follow him to the entrance, bags in hand with both destinations put to memory. Come on, before these get cold. Don't let him break you. Tucci semi-shouted behind the retreating teens. I am next to him, rubbing her eyes with a single hand in exasperation as a few confused customers watched on. So how often is he like that? He seemed really laid back at first, RWBY inquired as she was steadily walking beside the Uzumaki on the sidewalk. Naruto sighed. Only when his self-proclaimed old man rivalry is brought up. Any other time not much can make him lose composure. The only time I've ever seen him really angry was when someone was hitting on I am over and over. He chuckled at the memory of Tucci sending an overly specific threat involving exactly 3 whole eggplants, a spork, a rolling pin, and a fire dust crystal. Oh. Quickly changing the subject, RWBY pulled out her scroll and said, anyway, back to where we left off a couple of days ago. After a few taps, a bunch of notes, with various edits and highlights were pulled up onto the screen. With a small detachable stylus in hand, RWBY continued, have you decided the bullet size yet? That'll narrow down a lot of different gun models we can work with, the male hummed. Everything has to also be a gun nowadays, doesn't it? He quietly said to himself. Well, I don't think I'm gonna go with smaller rounds. I'm pretty sure everything within a small range and arm's length is already covered with what I have in mind, so I might as well have something that packs more of a punch from farther away. No matter what we end up with in the end, I'm going to have to practice a lot at a shooting range or something anyway. There was a sudden glint in RWBY's eyes. So maybe sniper buddies? She trailed off with part meekness and hope. Naruto amusedly chuckled and raised a brow down at her. RWBY cleared her throat hastily and looked ahead with a bit of embarrassment creeping into her. That sounded cooler in my head, she whispered in defeat. I'm sure it did, he replied with his grin widening. The last week had been pretty refreshing for him. As planned, he had worked with Qrow bright and early after his first spent night at the family residence. And just like Naruto had hoped, he was put through the grinder. Like it was mentioned by the huntsman the prior day, he arrived before anyone else was up and made Naruto run to the shores of Vale and back to get his blood going and start the foundation of strengthening his already impressive pool of stamina and aura. By the time he came back about 2 hours after his start, everyone was fully awake and had been in the process of their own routines. Taion was going over some paperwork that looked to be split up between relating to his teaching and official missions. Yan was doing some shadow sparring by herself in the front yard while RWBY sat nearby as she cleaned crescent rows with Sai lazily sitting beside her. Qrow himself was patiently waiting for the blonde as he ran down the now easily found path to the property. After a quick cooldown, they had a repeat of the day before, without a surprise punch to the face, and fought the rest of the morning and early afternoon away. This time Qrow actually taught the male team by stopping every now and then to correct forms and give bits of advice regarding hand-to-hand and swordsmanship. In the blonde's perspective, he only learned a little in a few days, but the experienced huntsman noticed that Naruto soaked in whatever was shown to him pretty quickly, mostly in a practical sense. In the back of his mind, the Brand one was looking forward to how much Naruto's abilities improved once he had his new blade in hand. The rest of the week, with a couple of days free due to other responsibilities for both parties, went by in a similar way, with Naruto staying for a bit longer after training to socialize with the family that he was quickly becoming friends with, especially Yang and RWBY. That's what led to the current Saturday afternoon they were now enjoying. Naruto had done the usual with Qrow in the morning, and the 3 teens decided to hang out in Vale when they were done. See you when the next shipment comes in, Naruto exclaimed to the shopkeep as he walked out the front door from dusk till dawn. The smiling old man behind the counter waved to the departing teens. Like always, he was recognizable from the baldness on top of his head with spiky gray near shoulder-length hair wrapping around the sides and back. Like Tucci, his eyes were forever squinted and were enhanced by the wrinkles present from the many years of life experience. He said in response as the door closed with a chime ringing out. So you move and organize boxes of dust crystals for him every once in a while? RWBY asked from beside Naruto, absent-mindedly reading bits from a magazine she just bought from the man's store. Yep. We worked out a deal a long time ago that once I would need it he'd give me a nice discount on dust. If this whole huntsman thing doesn't work out, I doubt that would ever happen though, then he'd pay me a fair amount of lean instead. RWBY eyes lit up. If you can get your hands on plenty of dust, then we are so going with the capsule idea. Think that's actually good for me? Naruto replied as he scratched the side of his head sheepishly. The young woman nodded her head excitedly. Yeah. With a big supply of dust and your aura, you'll be a lot more dangerous up close and even mid-range. And if you don't want to shoot with something small within a short distance, then we can go with anything around the middle of the pack to crescent rows. Maybe even something more explosive. The girl was practically vibrating in her steps and dangerously squeezed the now rolled-up magazine held in her hand. I can't wait for us to experiment with this. Naruto laughed at her enthusiasm as they kept walking. Eventually, after a few more blocks, they reached the heart of the commercial district right after the sun finally set. Despite the somewhat late hour, they knew they still had plenty of time to have some fun with Yang after. Their speed practically guaranteed a short trip to anywhere around them. While the tall buildings and unique architecture held her attention for a bit, RWBY slowly became more and more focused on the muffled music that was progressively getting louder. Before long, she found herself bobbing her head to the beat as the duo walked on. Once they turned one last corner, they were able to see the building that held the club that was blasting the tunes for its visitors. The huntress-to-be, though, found her attention switched again as she gazed upon the yellow motorcycle parked in front of it. Bumblebee, it was affectionately called by the female Xiaolong. She clicked her tongue in annoyance. Did Yang really ditch us to go clubbing? Naruto raised an interested eyebrow before shrugging. We have to go in there anyway, so I guess we can find out. Who are you delivering that one to anyway? She asked, eyeing the remaining plastic bag that Naruto held. The DJ here. The guy really craves ramen on the job, especially over the weekend. As they got closer to the entrance, the doors were pushed open before out walked another male and female duo that were quite the eye-catching sight in Naruto's opinion. The male of the two stood out easily enough as he casually waved his walking cane about in a smooth manner. The motion of the cane led to the arm that was covered in a long white sleeve that continued on into the rest of the well-pressed suit of the same color. Black shoes confidently stepped along the sidewalk and matched the black pants above them. Orange hair was mostly hidden by the black bowler hat on top, with the exception of neatly combed bangs that dropped down to cover the man's right eye. The eye not hidden away was green and looked at the approaching teens with a hint of cockiness, as he continued to hold a smirk that let out of a small puff of smoke from the cigar he was smoking. Yes, while the man held a certain uniqueness about him, especially with his hair color getting a mental nod of approval from Naruto, the young woman beside him seemed to beat him by a bit in that category. First off, she was short, even shorter than RWBY. The colors of pink, brown and white stood out in her outfit, with the clothes tastefully being a white long-sleeved jacket cut off below the chest only on the front that led to a dark corset, black gloves, brown pants that sunk into knee-length high-heeled white boots, and a multitude of necklaces hanging loosely around her neck. Her shoulder-length hair fit the color scheme, as half of it right down the middle was brown with the other being pink along with a tint of white. She, surprisingly enough, seemed to have heterochromia iridum, as her eyes were also brown and pink, except they were opposite colors than the section of hair above them, and hitting home on a Neapolitan theme. Like her partner, she too carried something, though in a seemingly more innocent yet professional sense, that being a decoratively patterned pink umbrella with a curved handle of a cane. As both groups passed each other, the orange-haired man tipped his hat at the teens as he continued to stride on in satisfaction, as if he just received good news. The short girl, on the other hand, gave a nod and winked to Naruto while giving RWBY a sort of curtsy bow combo, all with a polite smile plastered on her pale face. Naruto responded in kind with his own nod to the two, while RWBY had a quick mental fight with herself on how to proceed. After a stutter in her step, she cheekily smiled back while holding the sides of her dark skirt in a rushed curtsy. No words were spoken as both parties continued on to their desired directions. Once out of hearing distance, RWBY looked like she was about to say something but was cut off from the front doors blasting open violently as club-goers started rushing outside, causing Naruto and RWBY to quickly hug the walls as to not get trampled by the startled crowd. Many of them were yelling about the cause, and although it was mostly just jumbled words merging together, the duo were able to pick up a few key words like yellow, fight, and girls. As the crowd finally dispersed to wherever they chose to go, Naruto and RWBY saw that, somehow, Bumblebee escaped the stampede spotless. Letting the moment pass, RWBY stared at the motorcycle before sighing. You didn't see anyone with a head full of bright yellow hair in the crowd, did you? She blankly asked Naruto. Nope. RWBY groaned at the most likely implication of what was going on. Great. Might as well go inside and see what's up, Naruto commented as he headed on in with RWBY following along. As they cut through the now glaringly empty lobby, the music became much louder once the final set of doors were opened to the club's main floor. Bright flashing colors of all sorts blinked rapidly as they went on in conjunction with the music and caught the attention of the two teens for just a quick moment, until they were forced to step aside and dodge a flying object heading right towards their position. Watching the black blur shoot by in between them, Naruto and RWBY saw that the blur was, in fact, a man dressed fancily in an all-black suit with a red tie after he was forced to a stop by impacting against the hallway wall, with his red sunglasses hanging off of one ear and noticeably cracked, along with his audible groans of pain. They were easily able to tell the man had been launched by painful means. Taking a quick guess of the reason the man was in his position, RWBY slowly turned her head with a bit of dread as the sounds of fighting became much more apparent to hers and Naruto's ears. Junior's going to be pissed actually. Where the hell is he? she heard Naruto utter as he was the first of the two to glance around at the ongoing damage done to the dance floor and the surrounding area. With her vision fully on the stage, she joined Naruto in watching the practically one-sided fight between Yang and the various and similarly looking men like the one out of commission behind them. Dang it, Yang, RWBY cursed to herself as she watched her sister continue her beatdown with a focused yet excitable gleam on her face. She was in her more common garb this time, of which included an orange scarf around her neck, a yellow crop top underneath a tan jacket that exposed her midriff, black fingerless gloves, black mini shorts surrounded by a brown belt and a garment that looked to only be the backside of a skirt, a lavender bandana wrapped around her left knee, and visible orange socks, the right one scrunching down a bit, underneath knee-high brown boots. Naruto was obviously glad that another person appreciated the holy color of orange. However, the crown jewels of her apparel were the bright yellow gauntlets dubbed Ember Celica. Each of them roared with every punch Yang threw as the shotgun shells within them shot off to deal serious damage. Each little explosion from the dust igniting lit up the area around her, though it was not that significant compared to the lights of the dance floor. It was a nice display to behold from an outsider's perspective, but it was horrifying for the henchmen that tried to take on the young woman with their superior numbers. Unfortunately, their efforts were useless in trying to deal with someone who has undergone her fare of huntress training. Once the last man of the small mob went down unconscious, Naruto, Yang and RWBY saw that from the DJ booth overlooking the room's entirety. Another similarly man with an oversized bear mask whipped out a submachine gun and started firing down at the brightly haired female. Instantly she started sprinting at him from across the room, weaving here and there and not letting a single bullet strike her person. As the final round left the weapon's drum magazine, Yang focused her aura to her legs before leaping up the impressive height and over the booth. Without hesitation, she kicked the mask in the face until she struck his body a few more times for good measure. Once she deemed him no longer a threat, she kicked him up and fired Ember Celica right into his gut. From Naruto and RWBY's point of view, the man flew in a magnificent arc in the building's airspace until he slammed onto the floor, his body bouncing a little farther after the impact. With a squeak, the now unconscious DJ slid past two new pairs of feet, both noticeably covered by fashionable heeled boots. Yang looked down at the new arrivals and saw that they were a pair of teenage girls, twins as a matter of fact. They both held a bored kind of look on their faces and even held the same posture. They were utterly alike in practically everything sans the length of their smooth black hair and color of clothing, one having a white strapless dress and cyan accessories and makeup, while the other had the same but in a red and black combination. The more noticeable parts of their outfits were the weapons. The girl in white had blades on her boots while the one in red had bladed claws around her wrists. Naruto and RWBY didn't hear what the twins said to each other, but they immediately set off to fight Yang with an arrogant air around them. RWBY took a step forward while reaching for Crescent Rose behind, but Naruto lightly grabbed her shoulder to stop her. "What are you?" "Don't," Naruto said while still staring ahead as the three girls started to fight. "This seems like it'll be fun to watch." "Why?" "Don't know if you haven't noticed, but Yang's been wrecking this place apart, and I'd rather speed things along before any more unwanted attention decides to show up," RWBY replied. Naruto smirked and shook his head in a negative. "Nope. Those girls have always been a little snooty, so I think they need to be taken down a peg. I haven't exactly seen Yang go all out besides a little sparring, but I'm sure she got this. Those two are definitely better than the rest of the guys here, but they've only ever had to be capable bodyguards against the more common thugs and such. We'll step in if things get a little too dicey." Resigning to stand beside the male for the time being, RWBY crossed her arms and critically started to watch as well. "And you think you can stop her if push comes to shove?" she questioned. Naruto hummed a little until he gave an indifferent shrug. "Don't know, but it'll be fun to find out at some point." For the next minute or so the two bore witness to a practical dance between the three as they fought on. Despite the twins having the benefit of actual skill and teamwork, Yang was able to keep up plentifully enough. Each side had their own share of decent hits, but Yang showed a fair bit more of finesse and durability as time went by. Like in any fight between capable combatants, even the tiniest mistake or instant of running low on energy can stop the fight completely. Sadly, the girl in red was the first one to be on the bad end of the deal as Yang took advantage and dealt a vicious combo of punches before one final punch of explosive dust sent her flying through a pillar of decorative glass. Naruto nodded in an impressed manner while RWBY pumped her fist to herself, silently rooting on her sister after the more competitive side of her started seeping through into her mind. With one opponent out of the way, Yang doubled down and focused on the deadly dance she was now undergoing with the kick-based fighter. "Seems she takes a little more time to plan when it isn't a straight-up fist fight," the blonde commented as he saw Yang walk backward as she and her enemy continuously gave a few feints, all while steadily moving in one direction hoping to see some sort of opening on one another. Kinda expected her to get right back into never mind. RWBY stopped once she saw her sister suddenly throw out another combo of punches that met their marks perfectly. Guessing the fight was coming to an end, Naruto said, "It was fun while it crap. Melanie incoming." Like the man now wearing a busted bear mask, the girl in white, Melanie, was shot off by a blast of buckshot and went through the air. The two spectators didn't exactly expect her to fly in their direction though. As the girl helplessly approached, her yelling grew louder, but her shout was completely stopped once she slammed into Naruto's waiting grip. The force from the catch pushed the blonde back and he probably would have fallen had it not been for RWBY pushing with all her might against his back. her boots letting out a few squeaks as they dragged back a couple of feet. Once they stopped, Melanie dizzily blinked until her mind cleared enough to know she was in a bridal carry. Once meeting blue eyes with her green one, she uttered, "Naruto?" Ruby poked her head from the side of Naruto's shoulder. "And Ruby?" "Hi," she greeted and only received a confused blink from the other female. "Yep," he stated. "Cool fight. Would have liked it to be longer, but it was still entertaining." "You okay?" While she still felt a bit of fresh soreness from her fight, she was pretty sure she would live. "Yeah." After her response, Naruto carefully set her back onto her feet. Once she finished checking herself over and not noticing Ruby fixing the positioning of the flower in her hair, she said, "What are you doing here?" "The usual." Naruto lifted the still perfectly fine plastic bag filled with food. "Oh, and yes, and I have you and Milsh's dumplings," Naruto replied with his own cheap imitation of the twins' more arrogant tone of voice at the end. "Spoiled princesses," he finished with a not-so-subtle whisper. Melanie huffed before she and the other two turned to see the other twin approach with a limp in her step. "Still alive, Miltia?" "You took a few good shots to the feather there," Naruto teased. On cue, the black feather in Milsh's short hair fell off to be hastily caught by her. "Very funny, you whiskered buffoon," she said back with annoyance. "As always," Naruto proudly replied until he and the others saw that Yang, who still hadn't noticed their presence somehow, faced off with a tall and well-dressed man carrying a large hunk of metal over his shoulder. If his height wasn't a solid giveaway, then his short haircut, well-trimmed beard and signature red tie and black vest certainly were. "That thing's also a rocket launcher?" Naruto curiously said to himself. "Huh, neat. You're going to pay for this," they heard him say in anger as he aimed and fired a cluster of rockets that exploded around Yang's previous position, her having to hastily roll out of the way. Is this considered dicey enough?" Ruby questioned her whiskered companion. "Yeah, I think we're getting there." He gestured for the girl to follow. "Come on, before Junior completely destroys his own place." "You two want to step in?" he asked the twins while they were now sitting down on the steps leading to the main floor and adjacent bar. In unison they waved him off in a shooing motion. "You'll be fine," they both said. Try not to break another nail," he retorted. As Naruto and Ruby walked closer to the improvised battleground, Junior was swinging away at the teenage girl with his now transformed bat. "Okay, children. I think it's time to stop," Naruto called but met no response as they kept on fighting. With adrenaline pumping through her, Yang finally decided to up her game by taking a moment to focus her aura as she punched her fists together, causing the energy she gathered to explode around her outright. With a bit of awe, Naruto watched as Yang's hair seemed to catch fire before she sprinted forwards and brutally punched the surprised club owner repeatedly until he was separated from his weapon. The last punch she executed sent the man rolling a little bit away across the ground, though he did end up using the momentum to stand back to his feet. As he calmed himself down, he looked at the strands of yellow hair he seemingly grabbed and ripped out from the last bit of contact he had with the blonde troublemaker. "Oh no," Ruby whispered fearfully, slowly taking a few steps back while Naruto looked at her confused. Whatever curiosity Naruto had was answered when Yang shouted a war cry of anger as the aura around her exploded even more, highlighting her still fiery hair and now deep red eyes. Without wasting a single moment more, Yang shot forwards with one final move in mind to finish it all. With fear clearly on his face, Junior took the angry punch to his cheek fully, and was blown through the air like many already have and broke through one of the windows near the ceiling to let in natural light. Naruto winced from the attack, hoping the man that gave him a good payday every now and then wasn't completely broken. Putting the man's well-being at the back of his mind for the moment, Naruto jogged towards the still glowing fighter. You done now?" Naruto called out to her before she looked to be getting ready to jump after the tall man. For the first time during the whole confrontation, Yang finally acknowledged Naruto's presence, but it wasn't in the way the male wanted it. Still high on the feeling of battle, Yang figured another voice meant a new opponent waiting to get destroyed like the others. Sadly, in the moment she didn't recognize the voice to belonging to her new friend and turned while shouting again, throwing her fist forward with the leftover energy she'd built up in hopefully one last punch. As her aura acted as rocket burners behind her, she almost instantly reached where Naruto now stood, his eyes widening a bit from the sudden threat. Off to the side, Ruby was fully prepared to use her speed to tackle him out of the way, but stopped once she saw an orange glow appear behind Naruto's back. She probably would have gone on with her hasty plan anyways, but the sudden calmness that overtook Naruto's face stopped her. Meanwhile, in Naruto's head, he felt his instincts take over from the incoming threat. If he were to think properly at the moment, he would be pretty certain that he could get out of the way in time. But with the bag of his delivery still in his grip due to a little forgetfulness to set it down, his inner consciousness overtook his mind with one objective: protect the ramen. And that's what he was going to do, while showing he was capable of doing it by forceful measures. Without a second thought, Naruto focused his aura and felt something emerge from behind him, eliciting a gasp from Ruby and even the twins as they watched on. Whatever was summoned struck forward towards Yang, revealing itself to be a glowing orange chain with a spike tip. The hardy-looking object quickly met the angry blonde and wrapped around her midsection, hoping to stop her momentum. Seeing that she didn't slow down by much, Naruto sent another chain to encircle itself around her chest, while also locking the arm she was using for the punch tightly to her side. The second chain seemed to do the trick in making sure she couldn't hit him directly, but with her excited mind still overtaking her senses, she used her remaining free arm to send a haphazard punch and shoot her last shotgun round. Once the bang echoed, Yang snapped out of it and saw that her target was Naruto. Heads up! She hastily shouted to him a ways away, the chains having pushed her further away from him after she slowed down completely. While she knew the round wouldn't do much to him since she saw him take worse hits from her uncle, she didn't want to unnecessarily inflict any harm. As the glowing ball of pain headed right in his direction, Naruto looked to concentrate a bit more before a third chain appeared from his back, though it seemed to come out shakily. Nevertheless, it did its job and successfully blocked the dust-fueled buckshot. With no more immediate threats in sight, Naruto sighed with a drip of sweat running down the side of his face as he mentally commanded the third chain to disappear in a small burst of orange particles. He then calmly walked forward as the first two chains carried Yang in his direction to meet in the middle. While everyone was definitely surprised by the turn of events, Yang especially was a bit more intrigued by the chains since she felt them somehow restrict her aura and somehow get her back to a normal state faster than she naturally would. Had your fill yet? Naruto questioned Yang once they were face to face. Even though she was still lazily being hung in the air, she couldn't help but smile mischievously. For now. What the flip are these? RWBY suddenly shouted from next to them. With petals floating down around her, the now excited weapon enthusiast burst towards the chains holding her sister. While experimentally touching the solid aura material, she eagerly shouted, "What the heck is your semblance, Naruto?" No further words could be spoken as, due to the shattered glass Junior flew through, distant sirens started to become apparent to their ears. Feeling a little nervous now, Naruto dispelled his chains to free Yang and said, "Maybe we should discuss this lat. Cheese it!" RWBY fearfully shouted before she turned into a blur of crimson and propelled herself into the air to the other side of the room and crashed through another window. Naruto sounded, looking at the new hole and not knowing exactly what to say in response to RWBY's instant escape. Has she had to run from the cops before? Shaking the thought off, Naruto turned to where Yang was and found her to now be missing. The male rapidly looked around until he somehow heard Yang's echoed voice from outside. Rendezvous at the ramen stand. Right after the command, Naruto heard the roar of Bumblebee's engine until the sound grew quieter from her leaving the area. What the? Naruto's mind kicked back into gear as the sirens drew dangerously close. Shit! Somehow he instinctively freed himself to curse the moment RWBY was no longer near him. He was about mid-stride to leave when he suddenly remembered the bag still miraculously being held by him. Very quickly he appeared next to the surprised twins and handed them a takeout box marked with MM and hurriedly said, "See ya later, Databayo." In the next moment he slid next to the still unconscious DJ, and set the now securely tied bag with ramen onto his chest. Patting around his pants and jacket, Naruto found his wallet, and took out the usual payment, and tipped before putting the item back in its home. "Enjoy, bud," he said in a hurry and started sprinting up the wall with his aura and jumped through the exit RWBY created. Melanie and Miltia watched as he disappeared from sight with blank expression. Knowing they were only doing their jobs and therefore wouldn't be in trouble when the authorities arrived, they calmly started to eat the food Naruto brought them with every delivery he did for the DJ. With a black eye forming on Melanie's face and a couple of bumps throbbing on Miltia's cheeks, the former said, "Why does everything involving him have to be so weird?" After chewing a few times, Miltia easily replied with, "Because he's weird." "Oh right, Omake the Guardian, the Geist." This particular type of Grimm was a bit more unique than its more animalesque brethren as it took on a ghostly form. As such, its main ability to possess inanimate objects for its own use go hand in hand with its physical appearance, that of which was a legless and somewhat skeletal-like form covered by a few white spikes and ribs on its upper torso. Of course, the more eye-catching feature like any Grimm was its mask as it creepily stared at whatever it so chooses. Geists were always a pain for those unprepared and just generally less qualified to deal with them, and like all Grimm, they were attracted to negative emotions. That was how this one particular Geist somehow found itself floating through the wilds of Patch looking for a specific source of negativity. It didn't know why it went the distance for its target, but there was something about it that it just couldn't ignore. No other lower Grimm would bat an eye and go on the hunt for negativity so dormant that, even with its intelligence capable of strategy, and the sense to retreat, was immensely difficult to pick up. After a long journey, it found itself at a log cabin house and started the final leg of its search. The negativity was stronger as it floated to the second floor level from outside, so that was a solid starting point. Very sneakily it floated through an open bedroom window and noticed it was occupied by two girls. Though it would have normally attacked with some devised plan of possession, they were not what it was looking for. The Geist was about to move on, but its gaze met the most hollow pair of eyes it had ever seen. It did not know what they belonged to, but it couldn't escape its sight. Whatever the creature was, it was laying on the face of one of the girls and defiantly stared it down. For some reason, the ghostly Grimm couldn't move and started to feel more and more unsettled as the seconds ticked on. Not much time passed until the Geist felt its form desperately shaking in fear from its position just inside the open window. Why was it reacting like this? What form of power did this creature hold within its stare alone that the Geist felt like its insides and very spirit was being ripped apart? The Geist didn't have the answers, and it was too late anyway. With an almost inaudible silent screech of pain, the Geist's body exploded in a burst of black smoke that immediately dissipated, creating a small breeze to gently blow over the occupants of the room. RWBY, who was lying in a spread eagle position sideways on her bed, quickly sat up and removed Naruto's sleeping cap that she put on her face in frustration from the lack of sleep. Unnoticeably behind her, Yang stirred a little. What was that? She thought to herself. She could have sworn that she heard something in her half-asleep state. Looking around the room and not seeing anything in particular, RWBY shrugged it off. After grabbing her scroll, she picked up the sleeping cap and brought its goofy gaze to eye level. Come on, hopefully Naruto won't be angry if we bother him a little, she whispered before quietly exiting her room. What if Naruto uses a katana in RWBY? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.